small number of people I want to talk to about moving forward. I thought he did a very good job. I thought he was able to put a balance of pushing and prodding to get the best team on the ice every night, with also throwing a little bit of hope out there and a blind eye to putting young players in situations they haven't been in and living with the results. And I think that's how you grow. You know, we had some young players do some really good things, and we had some young players make young mistakes that cost us, but that's part of growth. And that's what I thought Drew did a great job of doing. And so Drew was a finalist for the head coaching position, and that list isn't extensive.
Alongside Alex and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. T-Bone out on vacation today. He's in Nashville for the weekend. Well-deserved vacation for the little guy. We appreciate his work as always. Guy. We'll talk to him on Monday. That voice you just heard, of course, was Doug Armstrong yesterday at his press conference, updating all of us on how this coaching search is going to go. He says that Drew Bannister, Alex, is one of a very small number of candidates that are finalists for the position. That makes a lot of sense. I said to you earlier, I referenced a fantasy football draft, right? We've all done those in our past. You get the 6th overall pick. You put a list of 6 names that you'd be comfortable with on your list. And the 6th name on that list, you'd be fine taking him at number 6 overall. You'd prefer some others, but you'd be fine taking that guy at number 6 overall. I think that's how I view the current situation for the Blues. I think the Blues probably had Drew Bannister at like 25th on their list of coaching candidates when he was first hired here as the interim head coach. And now, because of the job that he did while he was the head coach here in St. Louis, he has continuously bumped his name up on that list. So you just set aside a whole lot of candidates. Maybe they were previous assistant coaches around the league or guys that are retread candidates that have had a million different jobs in this league. You don't have to talk to them anymore because I've got a guy that has upside, that has proven he can at least do the job. Great. That means that there is a very select number of individuals that you still want to talk to that are your reach candidates. When I was getting out of high school, Alex, I had reach schools that I would like to go to, but I didn't know if I was going to be getting in or not.
I was the reach candidate for a lot of girls. Like, if I can't get with the hot guy, let's go to Alex. He's the reach candidate.
Well, you were Drew Bannister in this spot, apparently. Unfortunately,
hey, Drew,
buddy.
We've all been there, man.
So I think that's where they're at. They would still like to get their reach candidates, and if not, hey, they're willing to marry Alex when push comes to shove.
Sorry, Katie.
Where are you at on this situation right now with the coaching search, Alex?
I agree with you. I think what Drew Bannister is he's a safety net. And it doesn't mean to be disrespectful to him, but I just think that's the situation the Blues are in right now, where they looked at it and they said, Drew doesn't have an opportunity for this. We're getting him as an interim because he's having success in the minors. We'll see what it looks like. But when they fired Berube, they felt like it was a lost season, and they got a really nice surprise in what Drew Bannister accomplished with them. Honestly, and I don't know if you remember this, BK, he's a lot like Davis Payne.
Sure.
And Davis Payne, if you remember, in 2009, 2010, they had fired Andy Murray like 35 games into the season. They brought up Davis Payne, who was in the minors, had just taken the minor league teams to the playoffs the year prior, and he won, I think it was like a 595 win percentage in his first 42 games. Well, Drew Bannister, 602 win percentage in 54 games this season, and then Bannister had the next season, didn't work, started off 500th the year after, and was fired. Now, I don't think this happens in Bannister's situation. Maybe he's here long term. I don't know. But Doug made it very clear that the success he had eliminated a ton of guys off of the list. So basically, I was reading between the lines. Any free agent head coach that is out there right now, Todd McClellan, Dean Evison, Gerard Gallant, Bruce Boudreau, as BK likes to call him, those guys were...
His name is Bruce Boudreau.
No, it's Bruce Boudreau. You know that. Those guys were wiped off the list the moment Drew Bannister started winning. And then it became, what's our upgrade? And Bannister is a guy that they look at and they say, look, we know he can win. If we would have given him a full season, he might be in the playoffs right now with this team. But what's our upgrades? And I think those upgrades, like it or not, are David Carl from the University of Denver, Joel Quenneville, again, like it or not, and then, as Doug pointed out, guys that are still competing right now, and we'll get into those a little bit later. But the one that I found really interesting, BK, the quote from him, was when he was asked what qualities he's looking for in a head coach, understands where the Blues are, meaning you're kind of in the murky middle, push and build the foundation, which is pushing the Thomases, the Kyrous, those types of players, respect of the veterans and the pulse of the youth. Yep. Those are the qualities you're looking for. So look
in other words, I need a good coach.
Yeah. I need a good coach, but I need
a good coach does all of those things.
Right.
And I'm not trying to diminish anything
No.
he said. Like that's a really good checklist, but his criteria was how would I hire a really good coach.
But what he also said was like, look, it's like if we need a coach that gives us that extra 5% to be a Stanley Cup contender, we're not in that spot.
Sure.
So mark off any of these guys that you think and be like, oh, he'd be really good. I think that actually pushes Joel Quenneville out of this conversation unless he's just in a different mindset. But yeah, I think Bannister's got this job, but it's going to be you'll have this job if none of our other candidates are available for us.
And I was listening to the Fast Lane yesterday, and I was listening to Jamie and Stalter and especially what Carey was saying about Bannister and what he was able to accomplish. And they made some really interesting points about like, okay, what more could he have shown you? If you're not going to hire him after what we just saw, where he got this thing back on the rails, and there are legitimate holes that you can poke in the resume of what they did down the stretch, and that's all fair. I would also add, I don't know how many coaches were really going to get this thing not just back on the rails, but heading in the 100% correct direction, given where they were when he took over. So when I was thinking about it, Alex, I was like, they make good points, but also like if for whatever reason Jim Montgomery actually becomes available and you didn't wait to have the conversation of, hey, do you want to come coach the Blues? You're not doing your job. If Sheldon Keefe, the current head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, gets fired after the season because they get booted in the first round, and you didn't wait to have that conversation, you made a mistake probably. If you are truly convinced, and I am not on this side, I don't think they should hire him. But if you are truly convinced that the best coach of this generation in the NHL is Joel Quenneville, and you think that he is worthy of giving another opportunity to, and you've talked with him and you've done all of your vetting and you're comfortable with what's taken place with him, if you feel that way, you should hire him. I don't feel that way. I'm not comfortable with all that stuff. But if you do, as Doug Armstrong, you should hire him. Because these guys have proven it, not just for 35 games, but over the course of, multiple seasons in the NHL. So that's why I don't think they should just immediately hand the job over to Drew Bannister. You got to go out and talk to these other guys first. You got to find out if you could potentially get a more proven, potentially better for right now head coach than Bannister.
I mean, the way I look at this, and they're right. Like, look, you finished 11 games above 500 under Drew Bannister. Like, that is nothing to turn your nose towards. But overall, the team was pretty similar. Like the goals for per game, exact same.
It was special teams.
Your special teams. Your goals allowed were different, but I would argue that was a lot of your goaltending just stealing games for you. And here's the part that I'm just uncertain of with Drew Bannister. The peaks and valleys were still there for some of the most important players on this team. Buchnevich, Kyrou, Braden Shen. You didn't get the best out of your defensive players, especially with Falk and Krug. And yes, you grew those younger players, but you still stunk against those bad teams. Just like it was under Craig Berube, where Doug fired him because he said, I'm coming to the rink not knowing what to expect every night. You had the same outcome with Drew Bannister for a majority of that season.
So this gets back to one of the questions that I had, and I'm curious your thoughts on this as well, Grant. What do you view as the primary role for a head coach in the NHL in 2024? Because I think the role in Major League Baseball of being a manager has changed. It's shifted over the last 15 years. What it was when TLR was having all of his success in the early 2000s. Think about him and the other managers that were successful at that time. And now look at the managers of the game today. I'm not telling you have to love that, but it's changed. When you look at the job of a current coach in the NHL, Grant, for you, what is the primary responsibility of that individual?
I think it's putting your players in the best position for them to have success. Like, you look at what Jordan Kyrou did down the stretch, and Jordan Kyrou did not perform well under Craig Berube this year. He performed better under Drew Bannister. Like, that's one player where Bannister got more out of Jordan Kyrou than Craig Berube did this season. But I also think that, we're talking about, well, Drew Bannister didn't do this, didn't do that. Well, Craig Berube didn't either, and I think everybody would agree that Craig Berube is a really good coach. Like, nobody's sitting here saying that Craig Berube is a bad coach because he got fired. Like, Craig Berube is a Stanley Cup winning coach. Drew Bannister, like, while there were some things this season that I didn't necessarily agree with. Like, some of the in-game adjustments I wasn't a fan of. Having Kasperi Kapanen on the ice in overtime, for example, wasn't the thing that I was a fan of.
Not a good idea.
But for the most part, like, he was able to get a lot of good things out of some players that before him, it wasn't happening. And so I think you can look at this as a success for Drew Bannister. And, like, look at what Patrick Waugh is doing right now with the New York Islanders. Like, I think everybody is in agreement that Patrick Waugh should be the full-time head coach for the New York Islanders after this season. He had a 608 points percentage this season. Drew Bannister is used at 602.
Drew Bannister's candidacy if the Blues were in the East instead of the West and they made the playoffs, because they would have made the playoffs in the East.
I think they would. Or, like, if they get a couple more wins against bad teams, which that's another thing that really didn't improve from Craig Berube to Drew Bannister, but I don't think that's a coaching thing. That's a player thing. Yeah. Like, there's only how many head coaches are you going to run through before you say, maybe this isn't a coaching problem?
Well,
like,
and that's why I was already there, and I don't think that my mindset changes with Drew Bannister if they make the playoffs, because I think I would be looking at it as this was really good, but the moment Craig Berube was fired, I didn't look at this as a coaching problem. I looked at this as, well, the players didn't want to play for that coach, and they got a new coach in, and they started to perform. And that was, I mean, maybe that was just a disservice to Drew Bannister because he did find a way to get the best out of those players. I think when you look at the coach, for me, it's individual players. How do you get them out of their valleys faster? Because I do believe a coach has the ear. The good coaches have an ear for that locker room, to where when things are bad and what the coach is saying to get you out of it, it changes. And if the players aren't willing to listen to the coach, if the coach doesn't have the ears of the players, and maybe this is just a player thing, I always go to that. But that gets you out of those valleys faster. And for individual players, I feel like they found valleys fast and they never got out of them.
I could be wrong on this, and like Jamie might end up, I'll hear this quote back on the fast lane later on this afternoon. I feel like the head coach in the NHL has become the Chiefs vibes executive. Like, the guy that brings the best vibes to his roster and is able to manage his players' egos and personalities the best. Those are the best coaches around the league right now. The schemes there's like 3 of them defensively that you can play, and most of them are kind of running the same stuff right now. Like, can you be better or worse on the power play? Absolutely. There are things that you can do, but there are also assistant coaches that can help you in that regard. When you look at the best head coaches around the league, man, playing hockey hurts. Playing hockey the way that is successful really hurts. And so you need a guy that is going to inspire, a guy that is going to motivate, a guy that is going to connect on a personal level with the players. How many times, Alex, have we heard from Jeremy Rutherford stories about Jim Montgomery connecting with his players while he was here in St. Louis as an assistant, and now we're hearing a lot of those same stories about how he's connecting with players in Boston as well. That's the kind of stuff that we can't see. We don't see it on the outside looking in, and so it is really difficult to quantify. It's really difficult to determine, is Bannister good at that or not? I have no idea, genuinely, no clue if that is something that he's super successful with. And that's the kind of thing that, with these exit interviews that have taken place over the last 24 hours for the Blues, Doug Armstrong needs to find out. Hey, for the players, was this about you guys turning it on and getting things figured out and our power play really succeeding? Or was this about Bannister having the ear of the room? And if he did have the ear of the room, is that something that will continue if we hire him as the head coach of the Blues? Find out about that, and then go back to your list and find out, what about these guys? Do they have those skills? Do they have that ability to be able to really command a locker room? And if they do, cool. Those are the guys that you end up interviewing and having as your finalist list. But I think that the hard part from the outside looking in about determining who will or would not be successful as an NHL head coach is we have a really difficult time understanding what the dynamics are inside of the locker room without actually being inside of that locker room. So could Drew Bannister be that guy? He absolutely could, despite my frustrations with some of the line combinations, because those, while it's the stuff that we see, it's like the 10th most important thing that he does on a day-to-day list. Sounds weird because it's something that actually impacts the on-ice product, but it's so much less important than some of the behind-the-scenes things that we don't get to see.
And here's what I'll say, too. Like, you can like it or not, but the majority of the players on this team, it didn't feel like they responded well to the hard-ass style of coaching, like Craig Berube. So you bring in Joel Quenneville, I think it's going to be sort of the same thing. It doesn't matter who it is, John Tortorella, which he's not going to be available. But just as an example, like that style of coaching doesn't seem to work with this team. Meanwhile, with Drew Bannister, it doesn't seem like he's like that. He's a little bit more soft-spoken. The message is different, and it seemed like the players responded better to that.
For now. We'll see how long that lasts. You just never know in the
very
NHL.
long.
He's Grant Francis. That is Alex Ferrario, and I'm Brandon Kyley. We've got Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues. He'll join us coming up at 11:30. We'll continue the Blues conversation with Joey Vitale of 101 ESPN and Bally Sports Midwest. He joins us in the 1 o'clock hour. Coming up next, is it time for the Cardinals to make a meaningful change to the lineup? It's something that one major MLB analyst had to say yesterday. We'll let you hear it next here on 101 ESPN. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. In about 10 minutes or so, I'll ask Chris Kerber how the Blues can acquire Sidney Crosby this offseason.
Go!
It's coming
And
up here in just a little
Malkin.
bit.
Shannon Hayes, who says no?
The Blues. I'm not giving up
Obviously.
Shannon.
Yeah, okay.
Do you think Sidney Crosby would be open to being a non-captain here in St. Louis?
Yeah, man. It's less pressure for him.
There you go. All right, cool. All right, so we'll talk about that with Joey Vitale in all seriousness at 1:15. Coming up right now, though, Greg Amsinger was on with the morning show yesterday, and they asked him about the Cardinals' offense. As you can probably imagine,
He was
had some
talking about
ideas
how
on
they
how
were
to fix
great.
it. Here's what Greg Amsinger had to say.
I would actually like to see the Cardinals shake up the lineup a little bit. Because right now, the guys I'm the most excited to watch, I would love watching Nootbaar's at-bats. He grinds every at-bat out. I love watching Ivan Herrera. I mean, I can't get enough of this kid. I mean, he looks like 1991 RBI baseball batting stance of someone in that video game. He is so fun to watch. I can't get enough. I'd love to watch him get more at bat. Mason Wynn, can we move Mason Wynn up? Is it okay? What more do you need to do? He's in over 316. Shake the lineup up a little bit, because if you're scoring 3 or 4 runs against the Oakland A's, that's not a good sign. They need to start reigniting the way they do things. They need to be more attacked because they've got the athletes to attack.
So tonight, I would like to see them do that. And the big thing we're really talking about, Alex, is you got to move Goldie down. It's time. And I know this is something that I have advocated for in recent days. I was pretty confident they weren't going to do that. We're 19 games into the season. You're finishing out a series on the road at Oakland. You let your future Hall of Famer try to work through this. Well, since July 4th of last season, Paul Goldschmidt has an OPS of 700. It's not good enough, man. We're going on almost a year now of him being a below league average hitter. You just cannot continue while the rest of your lineup is going through fits and starts. Like, it's not been great. You've got to put your best hitters at the top of your order. So for me, that means changing out what you're doing at the number 2 spot in the order. I would like to see Donovan continue batting leadoff, and I would like to see Mason Wynn bat second. I would like to see what it looks like. I don't think that's something they'll do. I think they like having him towards the bottom of the order so there's less pressure on him. If they decide instead it's best to go back to the Donovan Newt idea, I'm fine with that. You could do Donovan, Nootbaar, Contreras, Arenado, and then bat Herrera 5th. I'd be fine with that combination. But any combination right now that includes Paul Goldschmidt, in my opinion, in your top 5, is a losing combination that does not give you the best chance to win that day. So I'd like to see them make the change. I agree with what Amsinger's saying, and I think it all starts with Paul Goldschmidt moving down in the order, starting in this series against Milwaukee.
Yeah, I think it's important to emphasize, though, like when we talk shaking the lineup up, like Greg mentioned, we're talking about one player. It's Paul Goldschmidt. I personally would like to see Contreras in that 2 spot, because I just think he's got the pop. He's got the ability to hit clutch. And if you're talking about Donovan getting on base, I get my best hitter right now, which I know Mason Wynn's up there with him, but I'm putting Contreras in that position. Here's the thing. The Cardinals aren't going to do it. Specifically, Ali Marmol, he's not going to do it because this guy loves his veteran players. We know that. And he's not going to pull a Paul Goldschmidt out. Instead, I really believe he's going to look at this and say, well, you know what? Goldie's a veteran. He's done this before. He'll get out of this. We're going to keep him in this spot. For me personally, you're protecting Mason Wynn, who is showing the ability to hit in pretty much any scenario possible. I think it's time to start protecting Paul Goldschmidt, because Paul Goldschmidt is in a very fragile position without a contract. Both sides, at least that's what the report was, they wanted to see kind of how the season played out. He's not hitting well, and you're talking about him being such an impactful bat for the season that if it goes wrong, you're talking about everybody pointing fingers at Paul Goldschmidt. I think it might be time to start protecting one of your top players and put him in a position to get some more confidence so that you can put him back into that 2
It's a hard spot to be as a manager, man. I remember one of my favorite quotes is from Pat Riley, who said that the most difficult thing in sports is coaching an aging superstar, because they still believe that they're the same player that they were at the prime of their career, but they're not. And so you as a coach have to handle that with grace, because, man, they might still be able to find some of it. Like Albert Pujols, his final season here in St. Louis, right? He found it. And Ollie deserves a lot of credit because he stuck with him. And we were all saying, hey, why are you starting him against right-handed pitching? This is not the best use of Albert Pujols at this point in his career. Use him as somebody that mashes left-handed pitchers. Don't give him starts against righties. Bring him off the bench whenever they bring in a left-handed reliever. That's the way to utilize him. He didn't do that. He went the other direction, gave him continuous at-bats against right-handed pitching, and it ended up working out for the best for the Cardinals. So I say that to say we've been wrong on this in the past, and it's worked out. Jordan Hicks, we said, hey, is it time to just give up on him last year around this time? They didn't. They decided to stick with him, and the result was he became one of the best high leverage relievers in all of Major League Baseball last year. So the Cardinals have a better grasp on this stuff, generally speaking, than we do on the outside looking in. That being said, when I look at it from the outside looking in, I see a player that has for almost a year now been on the wrong side of his prime. And it's easy for me to say, hey, move that guy down in the order. It's tougher to actually do it. I think that we are, if it's not in this series, we are quickly approaching the time where they just have to, because of what's happening around him. If the rest of your lineup was hitting, Alex, and you could find a way to mask this because you were scoring 5, 6, 7 runs a game with other contributions, cool.
Keep doing it.
Leave him there. Let him work through this. That's not what's happening. So you've got to make some kind of a change to what is taking place offensively. You have scored 3 runs or fewer, I think it is, in 10 of your last 11 games. This is a rut offensively that is really difficult to get out of unless you change something about the way you're going about it. And the one thing that is obvious that could change now is Paul Goldschmidt moving down in the order. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I knew I was going to do it at some point. And Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll get into Ask Us Anything. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you guys have any questions, sports or otherwise, we'll get into those coming up at 11:45. Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, joins us next here on 101 ESPN.
Hey, if you're like me and you like your house at a certain temperature no matter what the weather is outside, you're running that heater, that furnace, that air conditioner 24/7, 365 days a year. And then every now and then I shut it down to open up the window and get some fresh air in the house because we have dogs. Well, and I have a fish, but the fish doesn't smell like the dog. Anyway, the point is you got to keep that HVAC unit running. To do it, you got to keep it maintained. It's like any other piece of machinery in your house. And when you do that, call the folks at Classic Air Care. You can set up an appointment at classicaircare.com. They'll come over. They'll just check things out and make sure that that air conditioning unit is ready to go for the summer, as you know that you're going to be cranking that thing up in no time flat. Heck, even like this morning, it's kind of cool. Maybe you have the furnace still running. Whatever you need, and if the thing starts to go to kaput on you, Well, they've got all the options to repair it for you to make it easy on your budget, and their staff is fantastic. Check out their 4.8 Google rating at the top of their website and make an appointment today. Get that unit ready to go for the summer. It's Classic Air Care. Make an appointment at classicaircare.com.
Grant Francis here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals were off yesterday. They're back in action today as they welcome in the Brewers to start a 3-game set here in St. Louis. First pitch will be at 7:15. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, we'll have some NBA basketball for you. The play-in tournament, Heat and Bulls, starting at 5:30 will be the pregame as the fast lane is off a little early today. And then the Pelicans and Kings will tip off at 8:30. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley. Happy to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline to be joined by the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber, here on BK and Ferrario. He joins us typically on Wednesdays, but we wanted to be able to have him join us today, coming off of the press conferences that we were all out at Centene Community Ice Center for yesterday with the Blues exit interviews. Kerbs, appreciate the time as always. How you doing today?
Doing great. I got a good core of the 2010 AFA Phillies Ruffians team heading down to a soccer tournament in Louisville. So we went straight from the ice to the pitch.
Kerbs, do you got the white New Balance sneakers on, the high ride shorts, and the baseball cap on? Just ultimate dad mode.
Nope, not that. No, I do wear my gray New Balance.
Smart.
I live in New Balances, so I got those. I've come to find out actually, New Balances. Some of those New Balance styles are actually pretty hot. Is what I've been told. Like, can be hard to get. I had no, like, I'm not a sneaker guy by any means. I had somebody come up going, dude, where'd you get those shoes? I went to the New Balance store right near the radio station.
That's what I'm talking about. The one right downstairs, right off of Olive. People should go down there, say hello, tell them BK sent you.
There you go. That right. Tell BK sent you and say I need some of those hot shoes Kerber was wearing.
That's right.
Which is a phrase that's never been issued in the history of mankind.
No, Kerbs, the kids say today, and you can back this up because they're in the back seat with you. The kids say today they're blazing.
I don't think they do.
Ladies, is that true?
No,
is that true? Is the phrase things are blazing?
No.
Like what do we what's the word if my shoes are like
they're fire,
if they're hot, or if they're
fire. Let's go.
Yeah.
Alex has
on
never.
Fire.
That's why they're blazing, Curbs. They're on fire. They're blazing.
Just go to New Balance and tell them you want the fresh foam 1080s. You'll be good.
Yeah.
All right. Curbs, let's talk a little bit about the Blues.
Tell
Let's
them you
get
want
off
the ones
of
that bring your thighs out.
whatever this conversation is with Alex. We don't need any more of this.
Fire!
What was, for you, the most revealing or interesting thing that was said yesterday during Doug Armstrong's press availability?
That's a good question. I don't know that anything he said surprised me. I expected kind of what he said when it came to the questions regarding the coach. And I understand the process that he's got to go through on that. I do think the thing that I guess we should take out of it, and this is what we'll be referring to in September, and then is just the process where this was year one, of that process, and at the very end of his press conference, right before he said "see you later," which I thought was a great way to end the press conference. Honestly, made me laugh when I listened to it a second time. But I think to me that one thing he said is he goes, "We're in for the long play," and I think that's what fans need to remember. Now, long play doesn't mean we're not going to try to compete immediately, but long play means we're not going into a 5-year rebuild, going to get 50 or 60 points, and that aspect of things. He goes, it's going to be difficult to do what we're doing on the fly, but we're going to do it on the fly. He said, because I don't think I could stomach it. I don't think our fan base nor the ownership could stomach it. And so to me, that's he laid his plan out really well of what they're trying to do, and that growth, some of that growth is going to have to come from within.
So, Curbs, we just had this conversation in the open because, of course, the one nugget that we all took out was Bannister being on this short list because of what he did down the stretch. And, Doug talked about looking at other coaches, and Bannister's going to be in that group. Curbs, you've been around the NHL for a long time. What do you feel like the coach impacts for an NHL team?
I think the coach makes a big difference. I think it's a presence thing. I think it's a swagger thing that they could bring. I think that teams take on the personalities of their head coach. And from a coaching system style, yeah, that stuff still matters. That's all part of it. But so many teams play similar styles nowadays. But you can see the difference even from Berube to Bannister in something like the power play. It's not like all of a sudden the power play just started clicking. They made a real net front presence, the focus on it, which for whatever reason wasn't quite happening before. The puck wasn't getting through there. And you saw the difference of a power play that through the first 25 games was 8% and then was 21% the rest of the way. So to me, it does make a difference, but I think either way you look at it, the coach has got to have some swagger and got to get the respect of the room because that makes a big difference.
We're talking to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues here on 101 ESPN. Curbs, yesterday I found it to be really interesting. We were able to talk with Doug Armstrong, and we asked him about the number 2 center position. It's something that we talked a lot about during the regular season. Buch ended up there, but we saw Shin play there. We saw them do a lot of different things with it. And he said, listen, there was something that was basically in flux from day one of this season. That being said, going out and signing somebody that's 27, 28, 29 years old to an 8-year contract to fill that void for us, it's probably not the best thing for us because we think eventually Dalibor Dvorsky is going to be in that role. So, Curbs, when you look at this offseason and how their young players that are currently in place impacts those plans, what do you think the Blues offseason checklist looks like in your mind in terms of outside additions?
So, he's right on that front. And you've been playing Dallas in game number 82. What made me kind of think ahead to Dvorsky there is the fact that you look at what Wyatt Johnston was doing for the Dallas Stars, right? Taking, 5 or 6 picks after Zach Bolduc in that same draft, had a good rookie season, and is clearly their number 2 center right now on that team with the Dallas Stars. I think there's a chance, and from an age standpoint, there could be similarities that you can draw between those 2 players potentially. And so that's the long play that Doug was talking about in terms of you're not going to jam up a spot that he could easily grow into and be quite impactful for on you. I believe Brandon, that to me, the number one thing that the Blues need is some jam. I think they need a little more, and I hesitate to use the word character too loosely in this one, but I don't know if it's someone like a William Carrier, who's got winning experience now, who's played on some really good teams, that can come in that bottom six role, deliver a little jam. I don't know that it's, going quite to the point of saying bring back a Ryan Reeves, because I just don't know where that playing level is at this point in his career. And plus, he's got 2 more years under a contract there to Toronto. But I think they're going to need something like that in the bottom six. That you're going to have something that's going to protect the young players on the ice a little bit, bring some swagger, bring some jam. And to me, that fell on Braden Shen way too much over the last 2 years, and there's not enough other guys on this team and in this organization willing to do that. So whether it's somebody coming in and growing a pair, kind of like Rempe did with the New York Rangers, or someone like a William Carrier, I believe that that's something that the Blues desperately need in the bottom six of their lineup.
Curbs, I feel like we've said that every offseason for the last 7 years, though, and they either don't do it or they bring in a guy that ends up having that role and it doesn't go as planned because they're not very good at hockey, and then they get replaced by somebody that can help them more in terms of the actual on-ice product. And so I hear you, Curbs. I'm totally in favor of that. But, man, I feel like we are doing what we used to do with the Cardinals with the cleanup hitter, or what we're now doing with the Cardinals and a front-end starting pitching. And, man, I've had this conversation a million times, and the Blues don't seem to value it the way that we do on the outside looking in.
Valuing it is one thing. Finding it could be another. Hoping to see if maybe a guy or two would step up and take it. But you're right. They haven't had it since Pat Maroon left. And
they tried it with Kyle Clifford. That was the guy that they brought in.
And Noel Acciari.
Right.
And Acciari, yeah. So they've tried
well,
it.
Yeah, Acciari, it was a different player. Kyle Clifford is more of exactly what we're talking about. And you're right. But the difference was Kyle Clifford just wasn't able to get done what they needed to get done, on some other aspects of the game. Now, that said, I think if Kyle Clifford then came in now, it might be different because you've got a little more time. We were still pretty deep when they brought in Kyle Clifford, right? And this team was still considered in that window. So that was that scenario there. But to your point, Brandon, yeah, I think you make a fantastic point that, yeah, we have been talking about it for the same year. And same thing with those topics with the Cardinals. And you know why? Because it hasn't been addressed. And you know why it's still a topic? Because you still need it. So I don't think just because it hasn't been addressed either on the Cardinals side or on the Blues side with those topics you mentioned doesn't mean that I don't think you're wrong in still saying, hey, this is still needed. Now, look, one player can make that big of a difference, in that situation. And will he need to play every game? Maybe not. But somebody like a William Carrier that's just got a little more of that pop, a little more of that jam in him can make a real big difference. And, Toropchenko, okay, he's that guy that's going to get in on the forecheck. You don't really need to fight. He's thrown that body around a little bit. But I just think this team needs a little bit more of that pugilance in it to help it turn the corner. And listen, this is one aspect of the game, guys, that I don't think has changed. When you're bringing young guys into the National Hockey League, you've got to give them some jam around them to just give them some confidence out on the ice. That's what Chicago's doing with Foligno. I love that move. I think it's a great move. They're probably overpaying him a little bit to have him there and extend him because they need him there with Bedard. And I think the Blues are going to need some of that with some of these younger players as well. And it's got to be somebody more than Braden Shen.
And I'll just one more last thing on this, Curbs. The reason why, I don't my firm opinion on this is I don't think they're going to bring somebody in to do that necessarily, is because when I hear what they said yesterday about blocking opportunities for young players, and then I think about where these guys that you're talking about would fit into your lineup, I think it would block an opportunity potentially for a young guy like Zach Dean, probably going to have to be on that fourth line to start out next season. I think you're going to see Nathan Walker on that line. I think you're going to see Toropchenko on that line. I think you're going to see Bolduc and Kyrou and Neighbors and potentially Dvorsky at some point by the end of next year, Snuggerud. I think you've got a lot of these spots already spoken for in your lineup. And if that is the case, bringing in one of these players that we're talking about, I just don't know where they fit into your overall lineup, man. Like, I think it needs to be a guy that can go out there and also score 15 goals if you're going to bring in a player like this, in my opinion.
Well, they'll look at the goal total. The way I've been told is you look at that goal total around 10. So like a year ago when they were talking about the fourth line guys of Toropchenko, and then if they can get 10 goals from each one of those guys, they'd be pretty happy. And you're kind of in that realm, getting there with Oscar Sundqvist, who is probably going to be delayed in getting back, obviously, but because of that knee injury. I do think that history shows us, Brandon, that you will have some rotations on that fourth line. That, yes, you look at some of those guys that are penciled in there now, but look at how things are penciled in with Blais or Kapanen or Alexandrov, last summer, and things weren't quite that way. So somebody like a Carrier, and I went to him because I was just scrolling through the list, and his name came to mind when I was prepping for that game against Dallas.
I know Jamie has talked a little bit about like trading for a Trent Frederick, adding in a Kunin. Is that Luke Kunin? Yeah, Luke Kunin.
Well, Luke, listen. To me, the ultimate get for the St. Louis Blues would be Trent Frederick.
Agreed.
Okay,
and that fits the criteria that I'm talking about. He could be a 15-goal scorer for you on that wing through the middle six. Like that fits what I'm mentioning here.
That guy, that guy's 40 points. That's another level too. But he's that perfect guy that can play and have some jam. And at the same time, then listen, maybe you don't need it. And to your point, maybe you don't need it if Tyler Tucker fills that role. Is Tyler Tucker going to come in and look at what Matt Rempe did and say, okay, look at what he's become in New York and look at what he's done. I'm going to have to do that on the back end, right? And make that happen. So there are some guys that could do it. And if I'm one of those guys, that's how you guarantee you're staying in the National Hockey League for a whole year and you're playing every single game. So there are some opportunities from within. To your point, though, it's still something that this team needs. And look, I've talked to players in the locker room about it. They're the ones saying that this is needed as well. So,
interesting.
Whether it happens or not, I agree with it. I mean, it remains to be seen. But I just think it's an important factor of a team that's where the Blues are at to keep things moving forward.
Hey, Curbs, appreciate the time as always, man. It's been great to be able to catch up with you each and every week throughout the Blue season here on BK and Ferrario and all of our shows here on 101 ESPN. Appreciate all of your unbelievable work and all the help you've done behind the scenes as well for us with the Blues so far this year. We look forward to talking with you again soon, man. Enjoy your trip with the kiddos.
All right, you guys, have an awesome week. Thanks for all the great coverage. Again, I said this a lot, but Alex and Grant and Jordan and Ryder and everybody behind the scenes that help get these broadcasts on the air every single game takes a village, and we got a great village here. So thank you all so much, and we'll talk some playoff hockey next week.
Absolutely. You're the best, Curbs. Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues. Right, appreciate his time as always here on BK and Ferrario. I want to start our Ask Us Anything on the other side.
Because I got another guy that we didn't mention that I think is the one that they should target.
I'm really curious about this because generally speaking, I get what he's saying there. Like, it makes a lot of sense. They need a little, when he's talking gym, he's talking fights. Like, they need a guy that will stick up for their teammates, right? The big hit in the moment that it matters, or the fight when
Look at what Luke Kunin did in that Sharks game against the Blues. They're out of it, and they laid the big hit on Jake Neighbors.
That's the kind of thing. Do you have that in your lineup right now? The answer is pretty definitively no. I think we all agree with that as the starting point. So how do you acquire it? Do you value it? That's something I do want to ask you guys on the other side. We'll also get to the text line. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Ask us anything coming up next here on 101 ESPN. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. We're just talking to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues on the other side. He made an interesting point about the Blues needing more what he calls jam in the lineup. And Alex, when I hear that, my interpretation is they need a guy that's willing to stick up for his teammates, whether that means a fight or a big hit in a situation that calls for it.
Yeah.
And the Blues did not really have that this year in terms of what the team looked like at the end of the season. I think their hope was Tyler Tucker could have been that guy. I think their hope was, when he was here prior to the season when he got traded. Robert Bortuzzo has been that guy at times in the past. And I think they thought Sammy Blais was going to fill that role. But Sammy Blais, let's be honest, couldn't play, man. He didn't have the ability on the ice this year that they were hoping for. And when you get replaced, well, yeah, you're no longer out there to be able to do the job that they brought you in for. It's the same thing that happened with Kyle Clifford in the past. They've tried to acquire these kinds of players. And ultimately, it comes down to, well, we need guys that can help us. We need guys that can help us win. And this isn't the best version of our team with this guy into the lineup. And I think that's probably what would happen if they went out and acquired somebody this offseason. So I don't value this player the same way that others do, which is no surprise to anybody because I'm the guy that didn't value the fourth line the way that I should have, by the way. I was wrong on this. The fourth line was super important for the Blues this year. Alex, when you hear that, what's your thoughts on it?
I agree with him. I do think it needs jam. I mean, we've heard the players say this since they got rid of Pat Maroon, and that's why they got Kyle Clifford. And the problem was when you're getting a 34-year-old, you're not getting the same type of jam. Here's the other thing, too. And I know Jamie brought up Luke Cunningham, and I agree. Like, he's a guy that plays with jam. He's also a guy that I feel like could be a liability on the ice at times. And the one reason I remember Nashville got rid of him was they couldn't use him in all situations because he was somebody who would take the wrong penalty at the wrong time. You need somebody who's strategic. And Ryan Reeves is not at the level that I think you need right now, but Reeves was so good at taking the penalty at the right time, going up against the right type of player, putting the right hit in games. They knew when to do it when the moment called for it, so it didn't hurt their team. And that's the one thing I think you have to hone in on for the Blues. I think it has to be a forward. It's got to be somebody who could play third line minutes for you. It can't be a fourth liner who's in and out of the lineup, because if you're on the ice for 9 minutes a game, you're not able to make the same impact that a guy can in 14, 15, 16 minutes a night.
Totally agree. I think it's got to be a winger, in my opinion, and I think it's got to be a guy that can play third line minutes for you.
I think what you did with Kevin Hayes, you should have approached to get the grit, the jam that Curbs was talking about. I think the guy that comes to mind for me that had jam that could also be a good player for you was Ivan Barbashev. Barbashev played with jam, and I mean, we all remember that Colorado series where he laid out Sam Girard.
It's a great
big hit. That's the jam they're talking about. Will drop the gloves if you need to, but he plays 16, 17, 18 minutes a night.
My only retort would be they had Barbashev on the roster and still called for more jam, because that's when they needed to go out and acquire Clifford as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just think they always want more jam in their lineup.
Everybody
like the
wants
players
jam.
Always want somebody else that can take care of that.
Hey man,
business.
if you don't have jam, you're just having a peanut butter sandwich.
There you go. Then you're just with jelly. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. BK, what are your thoughts on the Mizzou basketball offseason? They got Mark Mitchell today, probably adding the youngest Porter brother at some point as well.
Oh, that's a gamble.
How do you feel about Mizzou basketball right now? They're back. They're officially back. Mark Mitchell, for those that aren't familiar, he's the forward for the Duke Blue Devils previously. He's from Kansas City originally. He's going to be going to Mizzou now. Guy that averaged 12 and 6 last year for a 4-seeded Duke team. He does have a lot of similarities to early career Kobe Brown. That would be my comparison.
Oh, nice.
A stretch 4, can get some good rebounding for you. Not an overly large guy, but can play the 4. I think he's a huge upgrade for Mizzou basketball. They needed it in a bad way. Really good addition for them, and I think they've done a good job so far through the portal. If they can get probably one more big guy, feel pretty good about where they're at heading into 2024. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. Guys, it feels like as you're talking about adding jam to the Blues lineup, everything you're describing is what Brady Tkachuk is. Goals, power, forward, fighting, 24 years old. Isn't he the player that they're looking for?
Yeah.
Matthew's the player they were looking for.
Well, but if you can't have Matthew, go with the other one, and I'll take Brady. That's the jam we're talking about. Now that's the extreme player we're talking about. That's going to be unlikely. But if you can get that, yes. If not, there's a step down that I think you can have impactful players, which stay tuned. I got a Ferrario 5 on that one.
All right, we had one final question here. I'm going to get to this on the other side with you, Alex. I want to talk about this plus Pavel Buchnevich's future. Somebody said, guys, when you heard the way that Doug Armstrong talked yesterday about Jordan Kyrou, did it make you think they are committed to him for the long haul? We'll get into that. We'll talk about Pavel Buchnevich's future as well. And if the two are tied together, talk about that next year on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. So we were talking on the other side. Somebody asked us a question for Ask Us Anything, Alex, about Jordan Kyrou, what his future holds in St. Louis, and what we made of the comment from Doug Armstrong about how he's become a lightning rod for discussion. I found that comment to be really interesting, man. He mentioned that he had stretches this year with no goals, but there were a lot of chances. He's got to improve the consistency. He said he's a game-breaking player. He's become a lightning rod for discussion. Jay Bouwmeester, Colton Parayko had that role with fans and media at times in the past. Now Jordan Kyrou is that player. He then added, if you want a relationship, you better be committed even in the bad times. That's what he was talking about, what happened earlier this season. They went through some rocky times, but they believe that is a relationship worth keeping. Alex, when I heard him talk about Jordan Kyrou, I don't know if you got the same impression, but for me, Doug Armstrong sounded like a man that's committed to keeping Jordan Kyrou for the long haul here in St. Louis. Yeah. I did not get the impression that is somebody that he is interested in trading this offseason. Where did you come down on those comments?
It was the same. I think for people that are dreaming of Kyrou getting traded for Brady Tkachuk or Clayton Keller, I personally feel like those dreams are dead. He did not sound like somebody who's going to be giving up on Jordan Kyrou. And look, I'll give him credit. Like, Kyrou did have a good season. He fixed, everybody was complaining about his defense. He fixed his defensive problems. Everybody was talking about his offense at the beginning of the season, and he scored 31 goals for you this year. Me personally, I feel as if for a guy who is an $8.25 million player, your valleys can't be that long. And I understand there are a lot of guys who go through this. Unless you're a superstar, everybody has their peaks and valleys, and sometimes those valleys last a long time. But the maturity that you're looking for from Kyrou is those valleys have to be very short. And this season, it felt like the valleys were real long. You can't have the gliding through games. You can't take a back seat in this one because I'm not feeling it / this isn't that big of an opponent. It's going to have to be, and Binnington said this at the end of the season in Dallas. He said, look, we are going to have as a group to all come together and realize we have to put more into this team this season if we want to reach our ultimate goal. And you're talking about all of the players, and it's not just Kyrou. Guys, Buchnevich had a lot of valleys this season. Braden Shen had a ton of valleys this season, but for one of your best players, you have to find a way to limit those valleys, and I think that's where Doug just really has to assess the situation, but you don't give up on a player 25 years old that has those valleys unless you're getting something back incredible in return.
So I've done something when the Blues are playing against the Stars that I personally think is a worthwhile experience. Watch Jason Robertson. Just watch him. Because I think he doesn't affect the game like the vast majority of the time that he's on the ice. Just no effect whatsoever. There are games where the Blues play against Dallas, and I'm like, I don't remember him being on the ice. And then I look, and it's like 18 minutes.
And had 9 shot attempts in the game.
And I just don't feel like he's affecting the game in some of those because he doesn't do any of the other things, right? He's not a guy that's going to be really big on the forecheck. He's not like a great defender or anything like that. His entire value to the Stars is I produce points. That's it. That's his value. This year, how many games do you think there were, Alex, in which Jason Robertson did not score a goal? 0 goals on the stat sheet for Jason Robertson. How many games do you think there were this year?
Scored 30, and there's 82 games, and I'd say probably 10 of those were multi-goals. So I will say there were 50 games he didn't score a goal.
56.
Oh, my God, I'm so good at math.
56 games this season when he did not score a goal. Furthermore, for one of the best teams in the NHL, the best team in the Western Conference this season, he had 23 games this year in which he was a minus on the ice. He had 48 games in which he was either a net neutral, 0 in terms of his plus minus, or a negative. The reason I bring that up is because I think we feel this way about Jordan Kyrou because he's here and because we see 82 games of him and he's not a superstar. And so we want him to be that superstar because superstars are producing basically every night. And like Matthew Tkachuk impacts the game in 17 different ways. He'll fight. He'll put a big hit on. He'll be in front of the net causing havoc for your other players to potentially help them score more often. Like all of these different things are impacting the game. Kyrou ain't never going to be that player. Never at any point. But when he's at the top of his game, which I understand, I agree with this sentiment, it's not often enough. I would like to see him take that next step to be more engaged more often. I'm totally with you on that. He mentioned, Doug Armstrong did, he's a game-breaking talent. And I think that's why you keep him, unless there is a clear and obvious upgrade.
Yeah.
If Brady Tkachuk becomes available, sure, yeah, I'm willing to talk about that. But it's got to be something like that. It's the same thing I said last time around. You don't just trade Jordan Kyrou unless Matthew Tkachuk is the guy that you can get in return. So that's kind of how I feel about it. I think that we are harder on Jordan Kyrou because he is ours, whereas people that watch the games nationally, they view Kyrou kind of similarly to how we view Jason Robertson, where it's like, oh, man, that guy is amazing. Yeah, when you're not watching him for 82 games. When you do, he kind of floats in and out of games similarly to Kyrou, in my opinion.
And look, I mean, we talked with Jeff Merrick. I forget who the others we talked with, but all of them said, like, yeah, that's a star player in the league. The difference is Robertson's 24 years old, and he's already had 2 40-goal seasons under his belt, where Kyrou has not gotten there. And at this point, and I believe Kelly Chase had said this on the broadcast, at this point, you have to be talking about getting to 40 goals, and we're talking about regressing rather than
almost nobody gets to 40 goals.
I get it, but like I'm just going off of the Jason Robertson, and here's the one that I looked up because Jason Robertson's the one, and I was curious about. Robertson this season has had 3 different stretches where he went 2 or more games without getting a point. Only 3 of them. And all of those games were 2 games, 2 games, 2 games without a point. Kyrou's had 13 of them this season to where he's gone without a point in 2 or more games, and he did it twice where it was a 4-game stretch. So Robertson, when he disappears, picking up assists, and when he disappears, it's 1 or 2 games, and then he's right back to it. Now, I don't know if it's goals. It could just be assists. But the difference is, and this is why the peaks and valleys for Kyrou have to be addressed, when Kyrou disappears, we're talking 4 or 5 games, and now you're begging on somebody else to pick up that load, where Dallas is like, well, if he goes, we've got Sagan, and we've got Ben, and we've got Marchman and Hintz. So that's just the one thing that I look at both of them, and I say, I do think you're looking at 2 projections that are the same player. Robertson's gotten to that level and avoids those massive valleys, where when Kyrou hits those valleys, you might not see him for 5 games.
I think, too, one of the things that will frustrate fans is that you see him take a game when he wants to. Like, that game that he scored 2 goals in after he made the comments about Berube and it was taken the wrong way, he showed up for that game.
Look at the Rangers game where he scored 3, could have been 4.
Exactly. So I think that's one reason why fans get upset, is because you can see that when he wants to show up, he shows up in a big way. But there's more times than not in a season where that's not the case. But, I mean, you do see growth from last year to this year.
Yeah.
Last year, he was, what, a minus 36?
It was bad.
This year, he's a minus 12?
Yeah, 12.
So, I mean, you're seeing a lot of progress.
Pretty mediocre team.
Yeah.
Very mediocre team.
And I keep going back to Islanders players because I know that team well. You look at Brock Nelson, who, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated players in the league. He didn't score 30 goals until he was 30 years old and 7 years in the league. In the last 3 seasons, he's scored 34, 36, and 37 goals. Like, it took him 7 years to really come around and become the player that he is today. Like, these things take time, and I think when you hear Doug Armstrong talk about the internal growth and the players needing to grow, it's part of it, and it's not going to take 1 season or 2 seasons. Sometimes it takes 4, 5, 6 seasons for that to happen.
It's frustrating, man. I get it. I don't blame anybody for getting unbelievably frustrated watching Jordan Kyrou on the ice whenever he's just gliding. I totally get it. I really do. But I tend to lean more in the direction of what we heard yesterday from Doug Armstrong, where it's like, hey, you guys are right. It's frustrating, and there's going to be some down times when you have a player like this, when they're really young. But also, man, he's game-breaking talent, and he's somebody that you want to build around for the long haul. So
he's 25 years old. I mean, like, he breaks it. Let's say he breaks into 40 goals next season, and he gets it. You're 26 years old, while Robert Thomas is 25 years old. Like, that's what you want. But you are really gambling, you're splitting 2s right now with a 10 showing. Like, it's not a smart move, but I know you're trying to win money. You bet on it.
What if I told you Brady Tkachuk's not available this offseason? Doesn't get traded. He's not available.
I'd say, what are my other options? And if it's not better than Kyrou, then yeah, I'd stick with Kyrou. But that no-trade clause kicks in. And unless you are certain that he will get out of this, what if you have $8 million tied to a guy that is always going to peak at 30 goals and be a minus player? To me, that's a second liner. And I truly believe the Blues, to get out of this, need Kyrou to be a first liner.
Coming up next, they do have a first line player, according to the national experts at least. that is up for a contract extension this offseason. Doug Armstrong made some comments about the future of Pavel Buchnevich yesterday. We'll talk about that and how he plays into the decision with Kyrou as well next year on 101 ESPN. Audible.
We didn't update the rundown.
It's my bad, man.
Grant's actually doing his job, and we were like, nah, it's fine. We're going to do Blues next.
We'll
and
get to the Pavel Buchnevich thing coming up here in about 10 minutes or so. But right now, we're going to dive into some NFL quick hitters here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, big news in the NFL when it comes to the betting markets.
Yeah?
If you want to go over to the Circus Sportsbook right now,
Hit it.
Circus Sports in Illinois, download the app today. You can go ahead and check out some of their prop bets that they have available for you. And some of those would include where's the first quarterback, or who's going to go number 2 overall. Alex, a couple of days ago, Jaden Daniels was a significant favorite, the quarterback out of LSU, to go number 2 overall in this year's NFL draft. Today, he is tied, dead even, with Drake May, the quarterback out of North Carolina.
No J.J. McCarthy!
Number 2 overall. Alex, are you buying the late steam that we are seeing, that you will see Drake May at number 2 overall to the Washington Commanders and not Jaden Daniels?
I'm not buying it. I actually think Daniels is still going to go to the Commanders, because when I look at those two teams and I try and decide who matches best with those teams, it really feels like Drake May, who is a mobile quarterback, but, you're in that pocket kind of conversation. That screams more Patriots, to where, man, I just think the Commanders are going to want something that's a lot more mobile. And when you've got Jaden Daniels, it seems that way. So I could be completely wrong on this. I don't know ball, but no, I actually think Daniels makes more sense for the Commanders and May makes sense for the Patriots.
I loved watching Jaden Daniels this year, man. I thought he was the best player in college football. I thought he was spectacular. I am just so worried about his profile in the NFL. The comparison that you hear the most is RG3, and that's for the good and the bad that comes with it. People forget RG3 was better, at least in my opinion, in his rookie season than Andrew Luck was. In Andrew Luck's rookie season, they were in the same draft class, but RG3 had a lot that ended up working against him. He has a body that broke down, and that's a real concern with Jaden Daniels. He is slight. He's not a particularly big guy. He's tall, but he's skinny. And when you have a player that plays the way that he does, where he just will run into every hit possible, we saw what happened last year with Anthony Richardson, who didn't know how to slide. He's 240 pounds, and he's getting hurt 4 games into his rookie season and never finished, I don't believe, any of those 4 games. Jaden Daniels has some of those same concerns as well. I don't want my guy to stop running, because that's where half of his value comes from, but he also runs into a lot of sacks, which is a problem when you're a team that is trying to build around a quarterback. If your guy is taking 7-yard losses on 3 or 4 different drives over the course of the game. So he makes me worried. All of the stuff that I hear about Drake May from the people that know more about this than we do, Alex, is hot damn, this guy has all of the talent in the world if he can just put it together. I'd bet on that. That would be the guy that I would take at number 2 overall in this year's class. And then if I'm New England, I probably wouldn't be able to pass up on Jaden Daniels. Unfortunately, I also think that's a terrible situation for Jaden Daniels, so I hope that they would sit him all year while they play Jacoby Brissett. The next big question in this year's draft, Alex, in my opinion, is what does that mean for J.J. McCarthy? His over-under right now is set at like 5.5 in terms of where he's going to go in this year's class. That very likely means somebody would trade up for him, because Arizona's not taking him and the Chargers aren't taking him, and that's your 4th and 5th overall selections. Based on where we're at, less than a week prior to the first round of the NFL draft, do you think somebody is trading up to take J.J. McCarthy?
I do. I think J.J. McCarthy is going to go in the top 10, and it's going to be somebody trading up to get him. I still hope my Raiders teams goes after Penix Jr., but I got a feeling that they're going to be interested. The Minnesota Vikings are the one that I feel like the most is going to say, like, we have to have a quarterback that can play now, and they'll trade up to get J.J. McCarthy. That's the one for me that I think are going to be very aggressive. The other one, Denver Broncos.
Yep.
Those are the two. And maybe a team surprises us in the top 10. I think a lot of those teams in the top 10.
Vegas is one of those teams, man. At 13, I can't get them out of my mind, and it wouldn't be for McCarthy, in my opinion. I think they're a Jaden Daniels destination.
How high would you have to trade up to get that, though?
I mean, possibly 3. Like, depending on what New England does. If New England says, you know what, we are not a good spot for a rookie quarterback, we're just going to take Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., the 2 top wide receivers in this year's class, and they just say, we think they're the best player, we're going to take them, we'll figure out the quarterback position later. And then maybe Las Vegas can trade up to 4 to get Jaden Daniels. And the reason I bring that up, Antonio Pierce, their head coach, was on the staff at Arizona State that recruited Jaden Daniels. He's known Jaden since he was like 14 years old.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that would be one that I would keep an eye on as well, but not for McCarthy. I agree
Yeah.
with your teams on McCarthy. It's Denver, it's Minnesota.
And where does
Those are the
Denver
two that
pick?
The 12.
So, yeah, those are the two that I think trade up there. Or maybe they just wait, because I don't know if any of those teams beyond like the top 5 are going to go after a quarterback. I think they get other areas of emphasis, and it might mean McCarthy drops to 12 or 13.
I do think there's a potential pocket around the 8th pick, 7th or 8th pick, most likely at 8 with Atlanta. Stelter's listening to us right now. I think he's probably rooting for this. I think that's a spot that if I'm a team that wants to move up for one of the remaining wide receivers, most likely the Washington receiver, Rome Odunze, I think you have to get to 8 because I don't think he's getting beyond 9 with Chicago.
Yeah.
I think the Bears will select him because they'll just add him to the mix with Caleb Williams and Keenan Allen, DJ Moore. Boom, we've got our top 3 receivers with a rookie quarterback. Let's go. Let's see what this looks like. Alex, if you could say there's a team that's going to trade up for Rome Odunze, Washington wide receiver, in most classes a top 5 pick this year because you have all of the quarterbacks and amazing talent at wide receiver ahead of him, probably going out right around the back half of the top 10. Who would be that team that you would be pinpointing as a good destination for Rome Odunze if somebody trades up to number 8 overall?
Yeah, I'm looking at teams that desperately need a quarterback and
Wide receiver?
Wide receiver. The Chargers are the one that I think would make the most sense.
But they're at 5. So they could take like Malik Neighbors.
The Chargers?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at a mock draft where they trade down.
Let me restate this.
Okay, no, yeah, I was looking at it wrong.
At number 8 for Atlanta.
Yeah.
Rome Odunze is the last top tier wide receiver remaining.
I got you.
You're looking behind them, somebody that can trade up to number 8 overall to take Rome Odunze. Who is the team that you would like to see make that move?
I'd like to see the Colts make that move.
I like that.
I would love to see the Colts make that move because they need more playmakers, difference makers with Anthony Richardson. I want to find as many weapons as I can possible so Richardson does not have to run the ball all the time so we don't have another issue like this and we're riding some backup quarterback for 10 games in the season. They'd be the team that I'd say go up there and be aggressive to get Odunze.
I think there's a few teams in that mid-teens.
I love the Raiders too, to be honest with you, but I know they need a quarterback more than anything.
Indy is one of them. I like Jacksonville to make that move because they really wanted Calvin Ridley, and now you don't have Calvin Ridley, and oh boy, that receiver core is rough. Cincinnati would be interesting.
I was just going to ask, if you're them and then you trade Higgins, right?
I would just keep Higgins and say we're going to get one more year out of T. Higgins, and then his replacement is on our roster, and we've got the next guy to pair with Jamar Chase. The Rams could be interesting depending on how they feel about Cooper Kupp's health.
Yeah.
I think Miami could be actually kind of an interesting team here because I don't know if they're going to be able to keep Jalen Waddle around for the long haul, so maybe you get one more year out of him. And then the other 2 teams that I would point to in this regard, Alex, Buffalo.
Oh, yeah, Buffalo.
Kansas City.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
It would require some serious capital to move up, but those 2 teams both desperately need a wide receiver. And if you're willing to include next year's first-round pick along with a third this year, that's what the Chiefs paid to be able to move up from 27 to get to 10 overall for Patrick Mahomes. The cost is a little less typically when you're not trading up for a quarterback. So next year's first and then 28 for Buffalo plus their third-round pick. Next year's first, 32 for Kansas City, their third-round pick. That could be something that is of interest if you're one of those teams that's trading down, especially if you're the Atlanta Falcons at number 8 overall for a Rome Odunze. The NFL draft is less than a week away. A lot of compelling headlines. There was a couple of drafts recently that weren't all that interesting. I'm fascinated by this year's class, dude. I think it's going to be one of the best, most interesting drafts on draft night that we've had in a really long time. And that all starts, of course, with the quarterbacks. He's Alex. That is Grant Francis, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, the first major offseason decision for the Blues is what Pavel Buchnevich's future holds with the team. We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with the SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. After their series against the A's, the Cardinals had an off day yesterday. They'll open up a 3-game set today at Busch Stadium against the Brewers. First pitch for them today will be at 7:15. And then tonight on 101 ESPN, we'll have some NBA play-in tournament action. Heat and Bulls. Pregame will be at 5:30 as the fast lane's off a little early today. And then Pelicans and Kings. That tip-off will be at 8:30. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
I just think we're closer than what people think. I think there's a lot of good pieces in this locker room that can get us to where we want to be a lot faster than people think. You got skill up front, you got good goalies, you got a couple of studs on the back end that a guy like Colton Prank who plays against McDavid and McKinnon, and he's way be able to shut us down or shut those guys down. I just think there's a lot of pieces here there where we can fix this quick. And on top of it, you get guys like Jake that had a great year. Boldy played well at the end of the year. That shows that you can score some goals. So there's some excitement and pieces where we feel like we can get to where we want to be next year.
That was Braden Shin yesterday talking about where the Blues are at right now and why he believes they're closer to contending for something meaningful than some on the outside looking in. With Alex Ferrario and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex, a big part of that is Pavel Buchnevich and what his future holds here in St. Louis. Yesterday, Doug Armstrong was asked about his future and if the Blues are going to potentially extend him. He said it's something that we would like to do. We're going to have conversations about it. He said, I'm a big Pavel Buchnevich fan and have been for a long time. Buch was then asked about it inside of the locker room. It's a little difficult to hear because the audio is kind of quiet, so I would otherwise play it. But he essentially said, Alex, I've enjoyed my time here. I wish we won more games this season, but I think we've had a couple of really good years since I've been here. My game has gone to the next level because I've been playing more and in more situations since arriving here in St. Louis. So he's going to talk to his representatives and see what comes out of that. Alex, in your mind, is that a guy that you think should and will be extended this offseason for the Blues?
Welcome to Riding the Fence once again. Yes and no. I think on the one side of it, he does everything that we talk about a player needs to do for this team. Like we talk so much about Brady Tkachuk. I know that he doesn't fight like Brady Tkachuk will, but Pavel Buchnevich does all of those things. He's great defensively. He's on the penalty kill, really good shorthanded. He's offensively gifted, and I think he fills a lot of voids that you need. On the other side of this, I think the Blues have to have a realistic conversation of who he is and how he fits into this lineup. Because the moment Drew Bannister took over, his game significantly changed. I mean, he had 18 goals in 54 games for the Blues. And I mean, this is a guy that we've all talked about, another potential 40-goal scorer. And this was back and forth of he played with Thomas and Kyrou, and then he was a centerman, and he was back to wing and back to center. You've got to figure out who Pavel Buchnevich is, and does he mesh with the timeline of our team, and can we get the best out of him? Because he's 30 years old. I would imagine if he looks at the two players that are making top money and says, well, I'm an $8 million player, then you've got three guys that are making $8 million, and are three of them top-line players. So I love Pavel Buchnevich. I think he brings a lot of qualities to what this Blues team needs to get them to the next level. It's why he was a part of my Ferrario 5 way back when, because like you needed to figure out a guy who could get you in the playoffs, and he was that for you. But his game, and he would tell you, significantly dipped in this final stretch for the Blues. You've got to figure out if you're Doug Armstrong, is this him at 30 years old? Or was the old Pavel Buchnevich who he's going to be once there's some stability with this roster?
I think a lot of it is tied to what they decide to do with Jordan Kyrou as well.
Oh, yeah. I think one or the other is where it's at. I don't think you can have both.
I think you can. And my reason for that is because I think a lot of what we on the outside looking in believe they need in their top six is what they believe Snuggerud and Dvorsky can provide. Because if you have Dvorsky as a 20-goal scorer down the middle, if you have Snuggerud as a 25 to 30-goal scorer on the wing, and I'm telling you that for the next 5 years, you've got Buch, Thomas, Neighbors, Kyrou, Dvorsky, and Snuggerud as your top six, you can win with that. Now, you're going to need some depth scoring, but, you know, we knew that was the case. That's the way that they build anyways. I think your third line at that point is probably Bolduc, Shin, and then whatever you decide to do with that other winger spot. Maybe that's like a Trent Frederick, for example. I think that's a pretty good top 9. And if you've got the right defensive core and this goalie in net, hey, man, that team can contend 2-3 years down the road. But it really comes down to, what does the ceiling look like for Snuggerud? What does the ceiling look like for Dvorsky? And can they hit that? And how quickly can they get to that version of themselves? But I think that's what you're talking about there, because you can make the money work since you have so many young players in that top 9.
Yeah, I just we talked a little bit ago about those valleys and making them shorter. The second stretch, I mean, Buch went through an 8-game stretch without scoring, a 13-game stretch without scoring. There was a 7-game stretch without picking up a point. The Blues have to, I think, do some hard evaluation of who he is as a player. Like, you know what he was at his best, but at his best was 2 years ago when this roster was stacked. And now you're not relying on him being a complementary piece. You're relying on him being your primary piece, because with Snuggerud, with Dvorsky, with Bolduc, with Neighbors, like Neighbors had a great season. Those other guys, I think you do them a disservice, as Doug Armstrong would say, of putting a lot on their shoulders. But when one disappears, it's up to those kids.
I would also add this, though, man. He does so much for you defensively. Like, God,
absolutely. And that's, if you move him, you have to get somebody who's also sound defensively.
And I don't think it's so much easier said than done. Like, if you don't have this piece in your lineup, I now have to fill his minutes on the power play. I now have to fill his minutes on the penalty kill. I now have to fill his role being up there potentially with Robert Thomas or as your second line center. Like, he just provides you so much flexibility, man. He reminds me, for the Blues, better version probably of this player, but what in some ways Brendan Donovan is for the Cardinals. If you lose Brendan Donovan, you got to fill a million different holes that potentially arise on your roster. He's the glue that makes everything else stick together. And I just don't want to lose that guy, unless it means acquiring a Brady Tkachuk, or unless it means going out there and getting a big-time player in return. I'm not trading Pavel Buchnevich for spare parts. I'm just not willing to do that.
You're not making any trades for spare parts this offseason. If you're making trades, it's change of scenery trades.
The next question is, what is that worth? And I know that some will say this is an overpay. I think Pavel Buchnevich is going to get an 8x8 contract.
Absolutely will.
Something very similar to what you gave to both Robert Thomas and to Jordan Kyrou. I think you basically present him with the same contract. Say, hey, listen, this is what it's going to be. It's not going to be a no move, but it'll probably include a no trade for the vast majority, if not all of it. Maybe by the end it's a modified no trade. They sometimes do that. But I think it's an 8x8-ish contract, and you see if he's willing to sign it. I would offer it to him.
And I wonder if Doug will approach him with a shorter-term contract. Which,
if I'm him, I would say no.
And that's what I'd be concerned about on the Blues side. Like, is it going to make sense? How often have we seen Doug approach a 30-year-old with an 8-year contract extension?
How old was Braden Shin?
It was coming out of it was the year after the playoff year, so 2019, 2020, off-season. So he would have been 28 years old?
His first year of this was the 2020 season. Let me take a look. I think
he would have been 29 years old at the beginning of the 2020 season.
Yeah, so 29 years old.
So pretty similar.
Yeah. I don't see that happening. I don't see 8x8 for a guy going into his age 31 season. That's going to be a difference.
I think that's what he's going to ask. I think he's going to get it somewhere.
I don't disagree with you, and that's where I feel like the conversation's really going to be with Doug. And maybe I'm wrong on this, because maybe Doug feels like that he's in the time frame, and right when they start to compete, you're going to be talking about a 34-year-old Pavel Buchnevich making $8 million, which, look, I mean, on the market, that's an $8 million player. Like, everybody talks Sam Reinhart. Sam Reinhart's a $9 or $10 million player. Mitch Marner, when he hits the market, Leon Draisaitl, 11, 12, $13 million players. This is an $8 million player. But for me, I think the Blues have to go into it and say, $8 million, is he going to continue to progress, or are we going to see the regression? And that's where I feel like you really have to have those conversations with both Kyrou and Buchnevich for how important their roles are on this team.
I think, too, this season, and I think Pavel would say this himself, I mean, he's at one point this year said he was playing terrible, was a down season by his standards, but that's a player that went through a lot this season. Like, the coach being fired, a coach that he was really close to, all the trade rumors swirling at the trade deadline, and then, being moved around from wing to center. Like, it's hard for a player to find stability in a season like that, and I think that affected Pavel Buchnevich. And, he's had a lot of good seasons in the past, especially the two before. I mean, last year, he was a plus, I think, 14 on that team.
Yeah.
I mean, that's impressive. That's not nothing. So I think for Buchnevich, like, yeah, you might not want to give him 8 years, but you're going to have to do that in today's market. Like, you're going to have to do things that make you uncomfortable if you want to keep players like
Yeah,
him.
hence giving Kyrou and Thomas that money. Like,
exactly.
A lot of people were like, no way. But, I mean, that's the nature of the league right now, is handing out long-term contracts to young players. The same is conversation going to pop up when Jake Neighbors is ready to get re-signed. When he's RFA status comes up after next season, the same conversation is going to be in that front office of, do we give out a long-term contract to a young player like this?
He's Alex, that's Grant. I'm BK. We do want to get to a list because Alex Ferrario was asked earlier today to come up with some names of guys that would add jam, quote unquote, grit, physicality, fighting, all those different things.
Just stick with Jam.
To the Blues lineup.
It encompasses it all.
And you did exactly that.
Oh, yeah. On the fly, BK. On the fly. We got time for this right now?
We got it.
Oh, hell yeah. Grant, you hit that open. All right, some of these you might not like, but here's the thing. I think the jam that we're talking about, and I've categorized this a little bit, these guys are 10-plus goals. These guys are guys that can play on the second or third line, and these are guys that I do feel like are going to be available either via free agency or via trade. Number 5 on this list, Sam Lafferty. You can look him up on your JFresh page, BK, but right now for Vancouver this season, 13 goals, 24 points in 78 games. Played last year with the Chicago Blackhawks, 10 goals, 21 points in 51 games. Centerman, 6'2", 205 pounds, 29 years old, can be a winger. This, to me, is somebody that is like a third or fourth line player, goes to the front of the net, but will drop the gloves. And that is something, and does bring the jam. Look at the hits. I think he's got 195 of them this season for Vancouver. This is one of those low floors, like, but you know what? Worst case scenario, he's in and out of the lineup. Best case scenario, he's a third liner for me. But I think he's going to be cheap, and he's a free agent, and he brings the physicality. Okay. Number 4 on this list. Now, might be unrealistic, which is why it's a little bit lower, but we know the Arizona Coyotes are now going to be the Salt Lake City. You call them whatever you'd like. Lawson Krause. Now, this would be a pipe dream, but if you're Arizona, you're going into a little bit of uncertainty. Some players might not be on board with this. Maybe you need a little bit of a change. 26 years old, 6'4", 215 pounds. 23 goals this season. Also plays with a lot of jam. This dude is just as physical in front of the net. Think Jake Neighbors, but with some speed. That's what Lawson Krause is. So I don't know how interested Arizona would be in this, but I would definitely approach this because jam, size, and you got a potential top 6 winger on this, and in the same age group as this Blues core. All right, this one's a little bit on the older side, but hear me out. Columbus sucks. We all can agree on this.
Familiar with that, yeah.
Their captain, can't imagine, is very happy with where they're at. Call about Boone Jenner. Ever since he came into the league, Boone Jenner has been a pain in the ass to play against. 6'2", can play center. So to me, this is a guy that I think if you move on from Kevin Hayes, could fill that Kevin Hayes role. Also can play wing, has scored 30 goals in the past this season, 22, a -8, and is a captain for the Columbus Blue Jackets.
What is his age, did you say?
30 years old. So he's on the older side, but he's locked up, I believe it's for 2 more years at $3.25 million.
Okay. So similar to what you have right now with Kevin Hayes.
Yeah, so he is not expensive at all. I think he brings leadership, which is a good thing to have for this Blues team.
Does he want to leave Columbus, though? He's been there since he was 20 years old in 2013. Does he really want to go somewhere else? I'm thinking family.
That's what you have to address. I do know, like, this is an awful thing to know, but I know it was in the news. Like, his wife had a miscarriage this offseason or this season. Sometimes that is just like, hey, we need to get a fresh start somewhere else. I don't know. All I know is the Columbus Blue Jackets are in a really bad spot. They need significant change. I don't think he's the number one guy you go to with it, but if you're him, do you want to be in Columbus anymore? Because you're 30 years old. This team ain't winning anytime soon. You only have a lot of prime years left. You've been in the playoffs 5 straight years. So This is one I'd be excited about. I don't know what their appetite for a trade would be, but I'd approach it.
He does have a modified no trade, too, so he would kind of have an option there. And he's making $3.75 for the next 2 years.
3.75. So he is, he falls into that Kevin Hayes time frame, and this is a guy that could play top 6 for you. Okay, the 2 that I'm super excited about, and this is the one that popped up that I'm surprised nobody even said when we were talking with Kerbs. Dakota Joshua. Free
Been there,
agent.
done that.
I get it, but you've been there, done that with a different coach, different role, and was still figuring out the NHL. Since he was with the Blues, 11 goals and 18 goals in back-to-back seasons with Vancouver. Look at his numbers now. He's a plus 19 this season as a centerman and has had 4 different fights this season.
So Dakota Joshua, by the way, is exactly what I'm talking about. You had this player.
Yeah.
He was this player for you. You didn't like it. You didn't want this in your lineup. You wanted something more. You wanted something different. Has he improved? Possibly.
Look at his goals, though, man. Look at his goals on NHL Edge. I pulled it up. Out of the 16 goals he scored, 14 of them are standing in the blue paint.
Sure, it's the same guy that he was here in St. Louis.
Yeah, but you know what? You're going to have a different coach. You're in a different place than what you were when Craig Berube was here. You were in the winning mindset, and he was a liability. He's been playing with Vancouver more as like a third liner that can take some of those risks. And look at what he's done with it. He's big, he's physical, he's 27 years old, and he's not going to cost you a lot. I like it. Number 1 on this list, I love this one. Sam Bennett from the Florida Panthers.
Well, yeah.
What do you mean, well, yeah? They're going to trade him. He's got 1 more year at $4 million. He's 27 years old, and he just scored 20 goals and had 100 penalty minutes.
Yeah, I'm in.
This is the guy. I mean, like, I'm not saying this like, oh, this can't happen. This is a realistic possibility.
Why would they trade him, though?
Because they need to sign Sam Reinhart.
Okay, if he's available, yeah, go get him. That's the move.
They've got $18 million in cap space with 6 forwards locked up, and he's one of them. They got to sign Sam Reinhart. They got to sign Brendan Montour because they just locked up Forsling.
What do you think the cost would be for this?
If you're Florida, do you just try and replenish your minor league system for somebody that you're moving on from? Could you just give them some minor leaguer? Because this is going to be a cap-shedding situation if you have to trade them.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that they would want like a draft pick prospect.
Does a second-round draft pick really matter? Does a first-round draft pick really matter to you this year? It's 17th overall. If you can get a dude who's 27 years old, who might be is going to be an unrestricted free agent after next season, but is also a guy that could play right into your plans, is a centerman, can play the wing.
I love it. I mean, I love the idea because he can play, if you needed him to, second-line center. Yep. And you could do the thing that they probably want to do with him and Dvorsky, where eventually Dvorsky takes over.
This is your winger. This is your winger. And somebody said you can't trade for him if you're going to re-sign Buch. You absolutely can. This guy's $4 million next year.
But it would only be a 1 year.
Correct. You would be talking about an extension, but I mean, at 28 years old, unless he's putting together a 30-plus goal season, I don't know if you're talking a lot more than $6 million.
Yeah, I would think he's a $4 to $5 million guy.
And at that time,
he's kind of similar in terms of production to Brandon Saad. He's Brandon Saad with Jam.
Absolutely.
Would be the way that I would describe him.
And we're talking about Jam right now. When he's a free agent, Brandon Saad's also a free agent. Yeah. Now you offset one for the other. Yeah.
I will say one thing, and you brought up with Luke Cunnin the amount of penalties he takes.
He's got 100 penalty minutes.
Yeah.
How many of those are fights?
Good point, but same with Luke Cunnin.
Yeah, it's true. But, I mean, this to me is a player that is experienced winning with the Florida Panthers, especially the last 2 seasons, performed in the playoffs. He's big, he's feisty, he can play the wing, he can score goals. So 2 fights out of those 100 penalty minutes. Yeah. So, yeah, you're taking penalties, you're a risk, but you want Jam. This is the guy that provides you Jam.
I like that one.
I mean, I think that's probably going to be, unless you get Trent Frederick, I think that is your best case scenario.
I've seen some people bring up Max Domi, by the way. He's staying in Toronto. He ain't going nowhere.
He's playing the top line with Austin Matthews, and he's got 9 goals this season.
Anywhere. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, Tyler Bertuzzi's another one if you want to look at it, but that's 31 years old and also hasn't really done much for the Toronto Maple Leafs this year.
I like it. It's a good list. It's a good list of some names
that I... buddy.
No, in all seriousness, it's some names that I hadn't really thought about previously, so I appreciate that, and it throws those names into the conversation, which I think is worthwhile. He's Alex. That's Grant. I'm BK. The Junk Drawer coming up next here on BK and Ferrario.
Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Brought to you by Fenton Bar and Grill. Best trashed wings in Missouri. Dine in, carry out, 7 days a week.
All right, let's dive into the junk drawer. Alex, if you had to say one person from 101 ESPN that would survive on a very remote island for 9 days, who do you think that person would be?
Ooh. I think it's Jamie, but I'm trying to think if there's somebody else. Jamie and Carrie are at the top of my list, but I mean, I'm thinking, not that they're not, but I'm thinking like MacGyver stuff.
Sure.
Who's MacGyver in this building? I'm not that smart, so that's why I'm putting Jamie and Carrie at the top of that list.
I think it's Jamie. Stalter has the intensity to do it, where he's just going to will himself to the end.
Jamie seems like the kind of guy that would eat some type of animal for 9 days to stay alive.
For sure.
And like drink his own urine too. Like he would like
that's frowned upon. I think that's actually one of those things. It's like you don't actually do
it's sterile. You gotta boil it.
Like
you gotta boil it. Yeah, it's sterile. You like the taste.
Grant, do you have a nominee that has not been mentioned yet?
I don't think so. Like when you said Jamie, Carrie popped into my mind too. Those were the two that were on my mind.
Of course, the pro athletes.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I mean, it would make sense.
The reason why I ask is because 3 men recently were stranded on an uninhabited Pacific island, and they survived for more than a week and used palm fronds to spell out help on the beach.
That
which
never
led
works.
to the survivors
It never works.
being seen.
It's like
they did come in. They found them. The Navy and Coast Guard came in thousands of feet from the air. They found a way to be able to rescue these guys. They were able to make it home with their friends and family. They're good to go now. But 9 days they spent on this island that is basically a completely remote Pacific island. If there were 3 people that could make it together.
Yeah.
Which show would have the best chance?
I think it would be us. I think the 3 of us could be pretty resourceful.
I'll tell you what show ain't doing it.
Yeah, morning show's not doing that.
Morning show
ain't doing it. Morning show is doing what happens in Friends when they were like trying to get
who turns on who first?
Oh, are you kidding me? I think
Randy turns on the rest of them. I think that's the way.
No, I think Dan turns on the rest of them.
Good call.
I think Dan turns on everybody. Dan is the lone wolf of that group. That immediately when that happens, Dan turns around and is like, "Bleep you guys, I'm out."
I think that's fair. I think there's a decent chance that Stalter would turn on his members.
Oh, absolutely, Stalter. Hey, look, coming from an Italian, there's only a lot of grace we could give somebody before it turns south fast.
And I could tell you T-Bone would be the first one to turn on us.
Or Alex, based on what he just said.
Well, that's true. But
T-Bone is 100% the one that would turn on us.
T-Bone would kill one of us before anybody else would turn, so he can eat one of us.
Yeah. T-Bone would turn first, and then I would try to make a plea for him, and Alex would get annoyed by me, and then we would all end up going our separate ways, and all of us would die.
But then you know what? After we take you out, I think T-Bone and I would be on the same page with each other, and we'd find a way to get off that island.
You guys seem to have some struggles in Nashville last year.
No, we did. It's just sleep. Tanner gets mad at me when I want to sleep, but that's fine. Like, cool. No big deal with it. Now, if you were to make it the 4-person, let's put Grant into our group, 4 people, Marshy with the fast lane, Rockio with the morning show.
I think Grant would do particularly well in this scenario.
I wouldn't. I'm kind of dumb when it comes to survival skills.
No, but Grant's pretty calm, which I think is a good thing to have. None of us are calm.
I would have the attitude of just like,
we'll figure it out.
Like whatever.
I still think the morning show turns, even with Rockio in that group.
Oh, Rockio makes them turn quicker. Rockio would be the reason that they turn on one another.
Yeah, I think once you add that 3rd person in, when you say there's 3 people, like individually, I think Jamie or Carrie beats us all.
I agree.
But if you add 3 people, I think morning show goes down first. But I think we outlast the fast lane.
I don't. I think it goes like morning show. If you had all of us on separate remote islands and it was a challenge of who can last the longest,
this is like Big Brother kind of.
The morning show is definitely the first to turn on one another. They're gone.
Gone.
We would be second, and I don't know that we would be too far behind the morning show, and then the fast lane would be the last one that remains. They've all worked on a team together, man.
Yeah, that's true.
Jamie and Carrie would be together like, hey, we've got this. We can do this. They're also larger individuals.
What about the balloon party? Jackson, Tim, you can throw Josh in there.
No chance. Oh, if Josh is in there,
Oh,
Josh killing all of us.
I was going to say, the only person surviving that is Josh because he's taking us all down.
All right, coming up in 15 minutes, Joey Vitale joins the show. But coming up next, we're about to see just how the Cardinals' front-end starting pitching will stack up against what appears to be a legitimate National League contender. We'll do that next year on 101 ESPN. We've been wondering for a while, how is the Cardinals' front-end starting pitching going to look against legitimate competition? We're talking about like teams like the Dodgers, the Padres, the Phillies, the Diamondbacks. Oh, we've already seen that. But now you're seeing it against the competition in the National League Central. And Alex, this surprises me, but the NL Central, don't look, but as of today, is the best division in the National League.
Oh, buddy.
You don't have a bottom feeder in this division the way that you do in the other divisions across the National League. The Marlins are 4-15 so far this year. The Rockies are also 4-15 so far this year. The worst team in the NL Central is you, and you're one game below 500 so far this season, man. And this is going to be our first opportunity to see the Cardinals against an NL Central opponent. Over the next 3 days, we'll see Kyle Gibson tonight, Miles Michaelis tomorrow, and Sonny Gray on Sunday, a game that I will be attending in person. So I apologize in advance for whatever weird shenanigans take place.
So they're losing that one.
Alex, what are you hoping to see out of the Cardinals pitching going into this weekend?
I think I'm hoping to find out if two of those three guys, which, I'm very skeptical on the Kyle Gibson front. I think I'm more honing in on the Miles Michaelis front. I want to find out if you have anybody else who could be towards the top of your rotation. I think right now you've solidified 4, I would argue, with Lance Lynn. And Steven Matz, I'm still uncertain of, but I think at best he could be a 3 for you. He could be, and I know T-Bone's made the reference, Brandon Pfaadt for you.
Sure.
I hope Gibson can at best be the 5, and frankly, I think he's already a 5 for you. But Miles Michaelis is the one I'm looking at, because what I've seen from Michaelis, I don't know if I could sit there and say he's a 2 or even a 3. I think I'm looking at Miles Michaelis and saying, yeah, you're probably at 4 for me. And it's great to have a guy like that who can give you 6 innings and, in some of these matchups can give up 2 earned runs and give you a quality start. But I also have watched him and thought, man, I don't know if that's sustainable all season long. And look, like, you're going up against a Milwaukee Brewers team that's got the second best OPS right now in Major League Baseball. So if you're going to show me and give me the confidence that, like, hey, you've got a quality rotation now with Gray at the front, you got quality guys at the back end that have stuff that could give you to moves them up a little bit, Miles Michaelis is the one I'm looking at to say, like, hey, can you get through this lineup?
That's the one that I've got under my microscope, but it's not just for this series. It's all year long. Like, he's the one that you have to see step up in a meaningful way.
Struggled against the Diamondbacks, which was a litmus fit test for me. And if you struggle against the Brewers, these are 2 teams that you should be on the same page, if not better than.
He was good against the Phillies. Ended up going more than 6 innings.
They've struggled this year, too, offensively.
Absolutely. He doesn't have the strikeout stuff. We know that. But at his best, can he be a guy that is consistently giving you 6+ innings, 2 earned runs or fewer? If you can get that out of Miles Michaelis, you're fine. But the start against the Diamondbacks was legitimately concerning. And I want to see how this team stacks up against its division. I don't believe what we have seen so far. I think I go back to what T-Bone says all the time, weird-ish happens in the first month of the season. I'm not believing this, man. I do not believe that the Milwaukee Brewers are going to finish the season as one of the best teams in the National League. I don't buy it. I don't believe that the Chicago Cubs are just so much better than everybody else in this division. I don't believe that the Pirates are legit. They've lost 3 in a row now. I think we're starting to see them come back down to earth a bit. So I want to see how the Cardinals stack up against what, at least as of today, is the best that this division has to offer. I think you should win 2 out of 3. I think you need to finish this series with a winning record against them, and you leave it saying to yourself, all right, I think this is a team that can stack up pretty well against your division, despite what we've seen so far this year. I like this team still. I think they need to figure out what's going on with Paul Goldschmidt and hopefully get him back on track. I would like to see them switch up the lineup going into tonight, but this is a series that has always been kind of circled for us. It's the one time the Cardinals play against the division between now and May 9th. It's a weird start to the season given the new scheduling, but this is a big one for them. I want to see them get 2 out of 3 against the Milwaukee Brewers. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get into a game of one's got to go. You give us 4 options. We'll tell you which one's got to go here on BK and Ferrario. But next, Joey Vitale, Blues analyst for 101 ESPN and Valley Sports Midwest, joins us here on BK and Ferrario.
Joey Vitale views things a little differently. Just imagine how he looks at hockey. Whoa. This is The View from Vitale, brought to you by Scott Lee Heating Company, a proud Mitsubishi Electric Elite contractor.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. One of our favorite times of the week is to be joined by Joey Vitale. Typically on Thursdays. Yesterday, though, it was a very busy day out there at the Centene Community Ice Center as the Blues had their exit interviews. So Joey is pulling double duty today. Joined the morning show earlier, joins us now via the 101 ESPN hotline. Joe, we appreciate the time as always, man. How you doing today?
Joey! You're so awesome as the offseason!
Hey fellas, I always miss those in the summertime. I look forward to when we come back. I wish we can get those chants going a little longer this year.
Tell
but I'm doing well.
Joe,
Thanks for asking.
Every Thursday, T-Bone and I will record ourselves just chanting Joey, and we'll text it to you.
Nah, it's okay. He doesn't need that.
Just don't look at it.
No, actually, do not tell me, BK, what I need and I do not need. I should use that.
You know what? My bad. I apologize.
Joey's already been home too long. Look, he's already snapping.
Yeah. Hello. Excuse me. I feel like my wife right now. That's how my wife talking. No. Do not tell me what I need. Okay, sorry.
You know what? That was on me.
Yeah.
Bad tone.
He's got a tone problem, Joe.
I
We've been telling him
apologize,
that.
Joe. I need to be better there. I'm working on it. I will try to improve by the time that we get you on again.
Tell me what I need and don't need
next season.
Damn it.
All right, Joe. I asked this of Doug Armstrong yesterday, and he said he could see both perspectives on it and then did what we do, which is sit on the fence.
Yeah, we're great at it.
I want to ask you the same question. Would you consider this season to be a success for the Blues?
I would. I think that, I guess success, unsuccessful really depends on the expectation you had. My expectation was a team that was going to miss the playoffs. My expectation was a team that was probably going to miss the playoffs by 10-plus points. They certainly proved that wrong. I thought it'd be a team that missed the playoffs and would play 10-plus meaningless games coming down the stretch. They proved that wrong. Did I think that Robert Thomas would get over the 80-point threshold? If you told me that at the beginning of the year, I would have said no. I thought he would have been 70-plus. Would you have told me Jordan Kyrou would get another 30-goal season? Again, possibly, maybe not. But if he does, I would consider that a success. And would you consider it a success if you look at the Blues goaltending tandem as being, in my mind, the best goaltending tandem next to the Boston Bruins in the whole National Hockey League? I would say, all things considered, I think this year was a success. It wasn't exactly with the cherry on top, making the playoffs, sneaking in there, and maybe making some noise in the first round. I mean, that would have certainly been possible. I think that would have been an A-plus of a year. But I think that this is definitely a successful year. I think the team took a step in the right direction. I think a lot of younger players who've been in the league 3 to 5 years, whether it be a Korpchenko, a Neighbors, or even like a Robert Thomas, all those players took a big leap forward. You're looking at a Robert Thomas as a number one center, not only on your team, but one of the best right now in the Central Division, if not the league, as far as shutting down other teams' opponents, because he did it quite a bit. Binnington continues to impress. He continues to keep you in games. Even with the coaching change, this is a team that was right there to the very end. So I look at all those pieces, the call-ups, the Zachary Boldukes, that you're starting to see the young draft picks, the Matthew Kessels. To me, those two guys have inked themselves in as the top 4D and a top 6 forward. So plenty of positives, and I think that the Blues fans should be happy. Not completely satisfied, but definitely happy with the step this team took this year.
So, Joe, I think it was a success for Drew Bannister also in his first year as an NHL head coach. Got that team to the 80-game mark before they were officially eliminated from the playoffs. We talked about this earlier, and you're somebody who has seen plenty of different coaches in the National Hockey League. What is it? What's the impact? What's the importance of an NHL head coach in today's game?
Well, I think the most impressive head coaches in the National Hockey League are first of all, they're great communicators and they're great people. I think that, you look at the Scotty Bowmans and the Mike Keenans, all those legendary coaches, they were at the time in X's and O's style. I mean, they had different neutral zones. We all remember when the New Jersey Devils, they won the Stanley Cup, I believe it was 95, with that neutral zone trap. The game has evolved. I don't know if a coach really outcoaches anymore from an X's and O's standpoint. I think with the analytics and the video and the scouting reports, and let's be honest, it's such an ever-flowing game. It's not like football. So I like to say that if people think that being a good coach in this league is about the X's and O's and the systems and the philosophy, to me, throw that out the window, because every team is right there now and every team is so close, and pretty much the game is played almost the exact same way. I think that the best coaches, to me, are those great communicators. And I think that that's what Chief was, why he was so successful. And I think for Drew Bannister, why he came in, he was super successful. You got to be a good communicator and you got to be a good person, because these players, I'm telling you, these players sniff it out. I'm not going to, call out the coach I was a part of, but when I was a part of a team in the National Hockey League, we had one coach who was just really, really mouthy. He was always around the players, always giddy, always joking around. And I don't know if he necessarily respected the space between you're a coach and we're a player. And, it was a small thing. It's all about the small things, guys, I'm telling you. But we would go to these cities. Remember, I'm on a bus with some superstar players, and all these fans are waiting outside the bus. And this head coach would get off, and he would be the first one to start signing autographs with all these people. And it just was a bad look, right? A lot of times you'll see Drew Bannister. He just goes right through. He allows the fans to see the player. Or you'll see him a lot of times just sit on the bus. And what I'm saying that is an example is that these players are smart, and they can see through the phonies, and they can see where there's a good person and a not-so-good person. Or maybe a coach is in it for the right reasons or the wrong reasons. And I think that Drew Bannister, to me, he's in it for the right reasons. The way he comes into media scrums, the way he says good morning to everyone, the way he says thank you, he's polite, he's a gentleman, and of course, he's a very honest but fair coach is what you have to appreciate as a Blues player, and I know all the players that have played under Drew Bannister certainly feel that way too.
We're talking to Joey Vitale here on 101 ESPN. You can also see him on Bally Sports Midwest throughout the Blues season. We certainly appreciate all of his time that he's given us here on BK and Ferrario. Joe, as you look towards the offseason now and you think about what the biggest need would be, the biggest want would be to fill out this lineup heading into next year, where does your attention turn? Whether it's a position, a style of player, what do you think that the Blues need to add this offseason prior to opening night of 2024?
BK, there's a few of them, but if I had to pick one, I think that this team needs to add a little bit of personality. I'm going to say veteran personality, not rookie personality, not like a young, crazy, dumb kid to come in and just be the light of the room. And what I'm trying to say? I'm talking about a player that has veteran presence, that has that pizzazz. He just brings that energy, and he's going to be good for the culture. I was hanging out with Alexander Steen quite a bit on the 2 road trips ago. We were in San Jose and just small talking, and I'm listening to Alexander Steen talk, and this is a guy that just got it, right? There's in the world, there's hockey players, and there's people that just get it, and there's people that just don't get it. And Steen was always one of those people. He just got it, right? He understood. He knew how you should run a room. He knew how you should show up. He knew how you should dress. He knew when to say the right things and when not to say it, when to keep your mouth shut. He figured out how to be just like a really good player for the culture. And you look at Braden Shen, who by the way I think he's done a great job as his first year in the captain. And it wasn't easy because he's lost a lot of veterans and a lot of help over the last 2 years around him, including their captain Ryan O'Reilly. But I think that Braden Shen could use a little help. I think he needs more support from a veteran presence about, hey, this is how we're going to do things. This is why we do things the way we do. Remember when Ryan O'Reilly was here, he was out there to the wee hours, pulling young kids, pulling veteran guys. They actually called him the skills coach. Halfway through the season, he got the new name Skillsy because he actually became the skills coach when he was here. That to me is a player that really galvanizes the group about this is how not only we play the game, but this is what we represent. We represent work ethic, we represent character, we represent the skills of the game, and we're going to represent how to play a very consistent competitive game. And I think you had a good number of guys this year that were doing that, but I think you had some stragglers, to be honest. And I think those stragglers, they needed to be pulled along by some older players, and that's what Chief was very fortunate to have when he was here. It wasn't just Chief. Chief would always say, hey, listen, I'm only one guy. I need the players. He would always say, I got Steiner yanking a guy over here. You got O'Reilly pushing the pace over here. He would always talk about Jay Bouwmeester. And these aren't the rah-rah guys always, right? Jay Bouwmeester had just this very stoic, quiet presence where he just did his job. And then when he did talk, boy, you listened, right? Or he let his playing do the talking, or even just his presence. You just felt when Jay Bouwmeester was in the room, and you knew you better be buttoned up. So I think, to me, if you could break that down. I don't know how you would break that down. I don't know exactly what that player looks like or what type of players in the unrestricted free agent market like that. But I would say that to me is going to be a big piece moving forward because, again, I think X's and O's, I think talent, skill-wise, I think you're right there. And you do not have a problem that I feel like 85% of the league has right now, and that's bad goaltending. So you got that as well. So add a little personality, bring a veteran in to assist the captain and all these other players about the culture, how you want this thing moving forward.
Joe, final one for me, and I think we all can agree, like, defensively, this team improved massively from 2 years ago to this, of course, our last season to this season. Do you feel like, though, that there needs to be improvements defensively from the team in terms of looking for different bodies to come in?
Alex, I don't know. I really don't know because I'll be honest with you. I know that some people were hard on Torrey Krug this year. I actually think Torrey Krug had a really good season.
Totally agree.
I mean, you look at his point totals for how much he's making, for where he's at in the depth chart. I think he pretty much nailed what he needed to nail point-wise. And you tell me a kid his size in the league that's as competitive as he is, that's also going to run your top power play. I mean, to me, I know that Torrey Krug was the question mark last offseason. I think there was obviously clear and made public that they tried to trade him, and he refused to be traded. And I think he came in and responded, had a hell of a year. And you're looking at Nick Leddy and Colton Parayko. I mean, you tell me a more solid top defensive pair than that in the National Hockey League. So that's three right off the hop. To me, Matthew Kessel's now going to slide in there with Justin Falk because they're going to be battling for that 4-5 spot. You know what? Marco Scandella is a UFA. I think we've seen his final game as a Blues player. Can you bring in another culture, Robert Bortuzzo, 6, maybe a Joel Edmondson we were talking about this morning type of player? Yeah, he can bring personality. He can bring that bite, and he can certainly defend. So I think, yeah, you're going to add a piece. You're going to add by subtraction because you know that I think Marco Scandella is going to have to walk. So you are going to add a piece. So I think that's clear. And I think from there, you got to be pretty happy with some of the veterans and some of the play out of this year, including what I believe to be, again, probably the best top pair, at least in the Central, between Leddy and Colton Parayko. Those guys, they logged a lot of ice time this year, fellas. I know they didn't get this team to where they need to be, but they put a lot on their shoulders, and they're playing half the game, and they're going out there almost every shift against the whole obviously National Hockey League's best. So all things considering, I would say that defensively, yes, maybe a tweak or two, but I don't know if it's as big as you need.
Joe, final question that I've got for you. I did want to ask you about Arizona, who is going to be moving. The Arizona Coyotes, quote unquote, will stay back in Arizona, and they'll be just dormant for the foreseeable future. And the team, everything hockey operations wise, is moving up to Utah. You played for that organization in your career, a couple of years there at the end. What was this experience like for you to see all of this go down the way that it did?
It was obviously it was hard. It was very, very hard. And, I think that my years there and the fan support there, for the passion that was there, it was hard to see that happen because financially and ownership-wise, they just couldn't figure it out. But they had all the pieces. They had the city, they had the fans, they had the team. It's just money-wise. I mean, it comes down to that. It really just couldn't come together. But, Todd Walsh, who does a lot of the TV for them, he actually had a really great 5-minute bit on their Bally side. I think it's Bally, I'm pretty sure. But I'm sure you guys maybe have seen it. And he broke it down perfectly. This game is about the people. And he went into some stories about when, his mom passed away and certain players reached out, or when his dad passed away. And I think it was one of either the general manager, the head coach, basically was there for him. And, and he looked at his years there in Arizona. He's been there since the beginning, and he recognized it is, and it's about the people. And you can slice this game however you want it. But now that that's gone, you look at the people, and that's what it really hit home with me, because now that it's gone and not there anymore, you think about the people. You think about the stands, who was the equipment manager. He's been there since the Winnipeg exchange. And he's, the way he just conducted himself with professionalism, and the way Shane Doan ran that room, which was so much kindness and so much humility. It is about those people. I remember small Blues tie into all how it's about people is I'll never forget when COVID hit and the Blues had to furlough a bunch of people. I was sitting at home and the world was coming to an end. I didn't know what was going on. We just had our fourth baby and I was as lost as a lost puppy gets. And I get a call from who we were just talking about, Alexander Steen. He calls me out of the blue one day. I answer. I'm all just shambles. And he just called to check in. He's like, man, I heard what's going on. I'm just thinking about you. You know, little things like that. I'm up here in Philadelphia with my daughter today. She just turned 13. Huge shout out to Summer, who just turned 13. But, you know, Alex, I told this story on the air before, but when the day she was born, I was in the minors. And I went to the 13 years ago, I was in Norfolk. And I come to the rink, my wife's in labor, and I just think I'm going to miss it. And it was Billy Guerin. He's like, what are you doing? Like, my wife's in labor, but it's a 12-hour drive. I'm never going to make it. He goes, Jeff Barrett, your owner's here. He brought his car. Go grab his keys. You go home right now, and you're going to at least try. And sure enough, I drove like a bat out of hell coming in, 100 miles an hour, 12-hour drive. I walk in, my wife's pushing, and 20 minutes later, I welcome my first daughter to the world. Awesome. So it's like those Billy G moments, right? And Jeff Barrett, our owner at the time, just giving me his keys and just says, go. Don't even worry about, here's my credit card, fill up the tank, whatever you need. So it's unfortunate. It makes you really sad, but that's what sports is about. Sports is about the people. It's about the memories. It's about especially the people there for you when, you know, let's be honest, when you really, really need somebody. It's not always the good times. It's more the bad times when you're down in the dumps and you need a shoulder to cry on or a pat on behind just to kind of get going again. And it's those hockey people that really make this world, to me, so special. And I know for Todd and everyone out in Arizona, that's what they're going to miss the most.
Hey, Joe, this was great, man. Thank you so much for that perspective. I think it's worthwhile, especially as an organization is ripped out of its roots right now. Hopefully Arizona gets another opportunity with ownership that can come in.
Better ownership.
Give them what they deserve down there. I think that's eventually going to take place, but it could be a little bit. So appreciate you giving us that perspective. Appreciate you joining us all season long here on BK and Ferrario. All the best to you and the family, man. Enjoy yourself up there in Philly. We'll talk with you again soon.
Sounds good, boys. Always great chatting on our Thursday afternoons and evenings. And you guys have got such a wonderful midday show going. And keep up the great work. Love listening to you. I'll be listening all summer. And if ever you have a slow day and you need to fill some time, never hesitate. Shoot me a text. I'd love to hop on and we'll small talk and hot stove some stuff.
You're the best, man.
Appreciate you.
Okay, boys. See ya.
Joey Vitale. Always appreciate his time. His unique perspective here on BK and Ferrario. Appreciate him hopping on with us today. Before we get out of here, Alex, get to one's got to go on the other side. You give us 4 options. We'll tell you which one's got to go at 314-399-9646 and over on YouTube at youtube.com/101 ESPN STL. I will be very curious to see how this move affects the players. And what I mean by that is, he's right. It's about the people. And when you're moving from Arizona to Utah, it affects the people. And some of those people are the players. And some of those players might not be too thrilled about moving to Utah. I will be very curious to see how that presents itself going into this offseason. This is not a team that needs more draft picks. They have 1 million of them. This is not a team that needs more cap space. They're fine in that regard. But I will be interested to see where this all ends up going.
Yeah, I mean, I know for a fact, Joey, who still talks to a lot of people with the Coyotes, he said on one of our pre-games when it all went down that he's spoken to a lot of the players with the Coyotes, and some of them aren't excited about this. They're actually frustrated that they have to uproot their family and move to a different city when they thought they were going to be an Arizona Coyote. So I do think that's going to be a very intriguing offseason. Of course, there's been a lot more discussion with the players from Gary Bettman, the new owner. They've spoken with the new owner in person. So it sounds like there's a little bit more of a smoothing over that has taken place. But I would not be surprised to see some players either opt for free agency or opt to be traded and asked to be moved out of Arizona/Salt Lake City.
Bettman is talking to the media, by the way, right now. He says the best case scenario was 3 or 5 more years at Mullet, which is a great college rink, but it is simply not a major league facility. Quote, it just didn't work, so I decided that we needed to look for a solution. Yeah. I don't blame Gary Bettman for this. This is the right move for the NHL. You couldn't continue staying there.
If you blame anybody, you blame this owner. I mean, that's why I said, like, when you mentioned, like, hopefully they get better ownership, like, this owner kind of dragged the fan base through the mud because it was like, no, we got new land. No, we don't got new land. No, we got to have a new building. No, we're not going to have a new building. I mean, you need to get somebody who is honest up front and is aggressive in the sense that can get the job done, keep the team in place, and keep stability there. Because, look, Bissonnette was talking about this on the TNT broadcast. The fans always showed up, whether it was Mullet Arena or Healer Arena that they had. It was always interesting, and we've talked about it. Grant's talked about it. If they were going to get into the playoffs, you knew that was going to be a fun environment. It's just the ownership never backed their fan base.
And I think the same thing is about to be true for the A's. You can't be in Sacramento for the next 3 to 5 years. Like what's taking place right now with that franchise is an absolute embarrassment. And I could see it ending up similar to what happened here with Arizona, or eventually they were forced to sell. And then, hey, maybe the A's will go dormant for a little while. It becomes a new franchise, and we see what happens with the A's later on. All right, one's got to go. Coming up next here on BK and Ferrario.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals had an off day yesterday after their series with the Athletics. They're back in action today at Busch Stadium, welcoming in the Milwaukee Brewers. It'll be Kyle Gibson going up against Freddie Peralta today. First pitch will be at 7:15. And tonight on 101 ESPN, we'll have the NBA play-in tournament. Heat and Bulls pregame will be at 5:30, and then Pelicans and Kings will tip off after that at 8:30. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is BK and Ferrario. Time now for One's Gotta Go. We offer up the talking points, and you get to pick which one's gotta go on 101 ESPN.
Count that big pen.
All right, let's get to One's Gotta Go. You give us 4 options. We'll tell you which one's gotta go here on BK and Ferrario. Let's start out with this one, Alex. One's gotta go. Over 40 years old activities. Golf, fishing, slow pitch softball, or pickleball.
Oh, man. You had to throw in pickleball there because I dislike pickleball just as much as I dislike fishing. I'll go fishing because I don't think I could sit there and do nothing until I catch a fish. And then when I catch the fish, I don't want to touch the fish. So, yeah, I'm out on that one.
You would like fishing at my pond because we have a ton of fish. This pond is overpopulated, and
But like,
we hardly ever feed them.
What do I do? Like, cool, I caught the fish. Throw it back
Feel
in.
like bluegill or something?
We got bluegill, catfish.
But like,
give you a little
catfish.
fight.
But like, what do I do, man? It's like, oh, I caught one. Throw it back in. Whoa, it was fun. That was exciting.
And what do you do with golf? You hit the ball and it goes in or it doesn't go in and you're either excited or you're not excited. Like, it's the same thing. All of this is that.
No, you don't know.
Well, with Alex, he breaks golf clubs.
That's right. There's a lot of anger, but you don't know the feeling of hitting a bogey. And I said bogey because typically I'm like triple bogey.
Touche. For me, I am going to go with slow pitch softball. As you guys saw, I'm not particularly skilled at the sport. Therefore, it makes me more frustrated than it does entertained. Softball would be the one that's got to go.
Someone said, get it and eat it, you sissy. I don't want to eat that.
Why not?
Because I don't want to go through the process, man. It's easy.
Have you been deep sea fishing before?
No, now that one I would do.
Oh, now I couldn't do that.
That's more fun.
Nope.
Seasickness?
No, I'm just terrified of the ocean.
Yeah, no, that one I would do. If I can reel in a shark, that'd be fun.
All right, one's got to go. 2024 Cardinals center field options. Tommy Edman, Dylan Carlson, Victor Scott, or Michael Ciani.
Okay, Michael Ciani. There's no upside there. You can go.
If we're talking about right now,
Victor Scott.
Sorry, man, but it's got to be Victor Scott. And I love the idea of Victor Scott, and I think he will be for 2025.
Your favorite player under the bus that fast?
For 2025, I think Scott will probably be this team's starting center fielder. It's just he's not there yet, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So I would go Victor Scott, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm with you. He's just got to get the bat figured out a little bit. Like, once he can bring that up just a little bit, and he doesn't have to be amazing, but just a little bit to where it can play. Like, that's all he's got to do. But for right now, yeah, I'm with you.
All right, one's got to go first round quarterback edition. Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix.
You know my answer.
Michael Penix Jr. or Drake May. Which one's got to go, Alex?
I would get rid of Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix is going to be the perfect average quarterback. Frankly, listen to Chase Daniel a little bit and find out how to be a 14-year backup quarterback for Bo Nix. That's what I would try and figure out if I'm him. All of the other 3 have number 1 upside.
I would go with Bo Nix as well. I think he's fine. I think there is so little upside there that it is not worth betting on in the first round. If you're telling me I could get him in the third, I would love to have a Bo Nix on my roster in the third round. As a second round? No, sir. All right, one's got to go. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for one's got to go. You give us 4 options. We will tell you which one has got to go. Alex, one's got to go. First round of the NHL playoff teams. The Maple Leafs, the Bruins, the Lightning, or the Panthers. Which one's got to go?
Mine's the Maple Leafs. You ready for this stat? I think I gave this one on the air. But the Maple Leafs have not beat... The last time the Maple Leafs beat the Boston Bruins in the playoff, there were only 6 teams playing in the National Hockey League. Wayne Gretzky had not been born yet. and Rocket Richard was still a regular NHL player. So it is absolutely the Maple Leafs. Congratulations. Your exit in the first round, and Sheldon Keefe is the Blues' next head coach.
How many times have they met in the postseason?
Look this up. I don't remember. I think it was close to like
19, 18, 13. Those were the... Oh, wow, they've played a lot.
Yeah. And
69, 72, 74. So they've had 6 series in a row in which the Bruins...
So I looked this one up on NHL Stats after Alex brought that up the other day. Since like 1966, they've played 34 playoff games against each other, and Toronto is 10 and 24.
Yeah.
So not great.
Yeah. So
so it's absolutely the Maple Leafs.
You're going to be out in the first round.
Their goaltending,
Linus Ullmark is going to
ugly.
shut you down.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys convinced me. That's the one that
Yeah.
you gotta go with here. And we'll see what Sheldon Keefe's future holds as a result of that. Coming up next, we'll hit the rewind here on BK and Ferrario. All right, coming up here in just about 2 minutes, we'll give you a chance to win a 4-pack of tickets to next Tuesday night's Budweiser Bash for the Cardinals versus the Diamondbacks. Next week is the first Bud Bash game of the season. It features a limited edition Jeff Suppan bobblehead. So coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll give you a chance to win that 4-pack of tickets to next Tuesday night's Budweiser Bash. If you guys missed anything from today's show or this week's shows on BK and Ferrario, you can always check those out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, or the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find them. Alex, they are all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
All right, we do this each and every day. It is the BK and Ferrario Rewind. Let's start out. We'll give quick thoughts on all of these things, Alex. Quick hitters here on BK and Ferrario. Coaching search-wise, with what we heard yesterday from Doug Armstrong, what is your current stance on how the Blues are going to approach this?
I think they're going to find somebody else from outside to be the head coach. And my tinfoil, Drew Bannister remains on the coaching staff as an assistant coach in charge of the defense.
I think they have people they would like to speak to that are like, when you were in high school and you had the reach schools, you're like, I don't know if I can get in, but I'll apply. Let's see if we can get something from them. That's what I think the Blues are doing right now. They're in their exploratory form of that. Some of those guys apparently are still coaching. My guess
I
is
did that in college.
Rod Rindamore, Sheldon Keefe, Jim Montgomery. You might as well find out. If they tell you no, cool. You're back at the same place that you are right now where you've got a really solid candidate internally. Pavel Buchnevich, after hearing what you did yesterday from Doug Armstrong, you think he's going to get an extension this offseason, Alex?
I don't. I think he's going to play out either this final year and then hit the market, or I think he gets traded in the offseason.
I think he will get an extension here in St. Louis after hearing what they had to say yesterday. I do not think, by the way, that Jordan Kyrou will be traded either. I think that
one I agree with.
We heard from yesterday. Well, we heard yesterday from Doug Armstrong led me in that direction. Final thing here. Two things, actually. Cardinals lineup. You guys think that Goldie will move down?
No.
I don't either. I think that we'll see it for one more series.
Way to go,
even
Ollie.
though I would. Who you guys got winning the Stanley Cup?
Mine's Carolina.
Ooh, put me on the spot.
I've got Florida.
I like those two.
I'd love Carolina to get bounced in the first round, so Rod the Bod's available.
I'm going to go Dallas.
Ooh,
I
really?
like Dallas,
Okay.
and Ottinger's been better
Wow.
down the stretch.
That's
Got
a
Florida.
new one.
Those are our Stanley Cup picks. Those are going to begin. The playoffs do this weekend. You'll hear, by the way, Bruins versus Maple Leafs right here on 101 ESPN tomorrow, pregame starting at 6:30. All right, now is your chance to win a 4-pack of tickets to next Tuesday night's Budweiser Bash. If you were texter number 101, and you could tell us who was at number 1 on Alex Ferrario's Ferrario 5 earlier today. Who was the number 1 player on that list? If you have that and you're texter number 101, you are going home with a 4-pack of tickets to next Tuesday night's Budweiser Bash. For Alex and Grant, I'm BK. We'll talk to you guys on Monday at 11 a.m. Fast Lane's coming up next.